Yeah.
He says howdy. So let's.
Ah, amazing. Oh, so now I hear some audio that should have was there before.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Let me save my work quick.
Wow, everything looks so much nicer.
Well,
What a difference that camera makes, eh?
Yes, yes. There we go. We have Benedict.
hey, Mr. Lucas.
Hey, how goes it?
Very well. I finally get the hang of it, I guess, after how many shows I did already?
Yeah. Details.
Yeah, it's like writing your first book. After 20 of those, you pretty much know what to do.
Yeah.
Not speaking from experience, of course.
Yeah. I just put out my 29th, and when I figure out what I'm doing, I'll let you know.
Yeah, okay. That's a separate show.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I should close this window. Okay.
Can you tilt the camera down just a little bit so we get a little bit more of your head in the shot?
Oh, I
Yeah.
only,
Yeah.
here we
Back
go.
here.
I need to confirm it with YouTube all the time. With YouTube, with Skype, that people want to connect to each other. Yeah. Okay.
You're missing part of my head?
No. It's just, yeah, there you go.
All the bits are there. I can confirm that.
Just,
Okay.
we want the top of your head to be a little closer to the top of the frame is all.
Ah, okay. Yes, so it can show off my bright yellow Linux t-shirt.
Yeah, you picked that one. I'm so relieved after that Twitter.
Well, it was the least popular in the poll.
Really? I thought it would have been the most.
No,
Of course,
no.
I think
actually,
your
let me
problem
go-
is when you do a poll, people are like trolling you.
Well, I put in a deliberate troll request or a troll response because some people, trolls are going to troll.
Yeah.
Yeah, no matter what you do.
So,
Troll mastery.
no, that's probably Alfred Perlstein.
Yes.
Right. That's his exclusive. Yeah.
Yes. The poll final results are 11% for this shirt, 25% for the Pam shirt, and 64% say go topless.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone who voted,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So, okay. Let me get rid of the webcam control screen. Save that. Get rid of that because I don't want to look at face. And Alan, I will answer your email after I talk to Liz.
Okay. Well, and I imagine it'll be a little flexible in that when we get there.
Yeah, but we should be able to have a guess.
Yep.
So I'm ready when you are.
Okay. You ready, Benedict?
Yeah, I do the intro. Any special intro you want to have other than Pulp Tech author?
No.
Okay, that works.
And recording.
We're joined this week by Michael W. Lucas, who has been on the show before. He's the popular pulp tech author of a lot of books and is joining us today for an update on his writing stuff. So, first of all, welcome back on the show. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. Thanks for having me back.
So tell us what you've been up to since the last time we interviewed you.
I've been writing books. Big surprise. I think the two tech books I've done since then have been the PAM book,
PAM Mastery, yeah.
PAM Mastery, and then the brand new HTTPD and RelayD book. That's on OpenBSD Web Services. Those are my latest tech books.
Cool. So I guess to get into that a little bit, can you tell us a bit about what RelayD is and what you can do with it?
Well, RelayD is basically a load balancer. It can either feed information into PF and update your firewall rules for you so requests go to specific hosts, or it can accept connections and mangle the requests and pass them off to web servers. See, OpenBSD's PF has a built-in load balancer. You can put in a PF table and distribute traffic between your various servers. The problem is this, in PF, it's a great example of fault-oblivious programming, because you can tell PF that there are 3 web servers and to distribute the traffic, but PF doesn't know if those servers are working or not. And basically what RelayD does is every 10 seconds, or however often you say, it queries the servers and determines if they're working or not, and if they should stay in the PF table. And it will add or remove servers to that table as need be. So you can do things like just check and see if the port is open, check and see if the, say if a test page is there. You can wrap a HTTP transaction in TLS and basically forcibly nail secure transport onto an old insecure protocol.
Sure.
And that's with a relay with that's with a redirect. RelayD also has this thing called relays, where you can terminate the connection on the RelayD host, and it will create a new connection out to your servers, which lets you do things like application inspection. You can, let's say your company has a web application policy, and you can only use certain HTTP methods, or certain HTTP methods are not allowed, or perhaps you're not allowed to. I've worked at a company once where the web applications were not allowed to use cookies.
Yeah.
So you can enforce this in RelayD. You can do things such as only HTTP gets are allowed, which I'd want to say nobody would ever do that, but I'm sure among your listeners somebody needs to do that. And that all kind of feeds into the HTTPD web server they've built, which is it's a very fast, very small, minimal web server. So basically, it's kind of what Nginx used to be when it first came out, and it had core functions, and before it had grown all the other features. And I'm really fond of HTTPD because it means I never have to debug an Apache configuration file again.
Oh yeah, that's a plus.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I can stand up a PHP web server in 10 lines of config.
Not bad.
And there's nothing there to break.
Good.
So that's the short answer.
Yeah, and the rest is in the whole book, I guess. There's much more to write about.
Oh, I guess the other thing,
there's gobs of things.
there's an interesting optimization in RelayD called socket splicing. So when you have RelayD terminate the connection and then it makes the forward connection onto the other service, unlike most application level load balancers like that, it doesn't have to shuffle the bytes back and forth. It can say, take this socket and just weld them together in the kernel. And OpenBSD's kernel will pass all the blocks back and forth, and RelayD doesn't have to do the work, making it higher performance.
Right. RelayD only does as much work as you absolutely require it to. My understanding is if you do a bunch of complicated filtering and rewriting of headers, it will have to do more work. Mm-hmm. But they've optimized the crap out of it. So I would put RelayD up against Cisco or F5 or anything like that with a smile.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is also available on other systems, or is it OpenBSD only?
Well, it's built on LibreSSL. So anywhere you have LibreSSL and PF, you can use it. This means OpenBSD, of course, but there's HardenBSD, TrueOS, both of those just out of the box. If you are building FreeBSD packages with LibreSSL, which a whole bunch of people are doing, you can use this as well. I'm sure that someday we're going to wind up with ports to some other operating systems. The first one that comes to mind is Debian's K FreeBSD.
Right.
They run PF. I wouldn't be shocked to see them do a port someday. So it's a pretty specific audience for this book, but people keep looking at OpenBSD as just a router, just a firewall. And no, there are actual applications that make it rather powerful.
Mm. Yeah, I'm sure many people will check it out after this interview and also get the book, of course.
I can hope. And I do have to show off. I'm really proud of the cover. Let's see if I can get this in the camera. It's full wraparound. That's there's an old painting, Watson and the Shark. Mm-hmm. And this is that painting starring Puffy.
Of course.
So
that's nice.
Yeah. I like being able to do fun things like that in book covers.
Yeah, especially if you have access to a graphic artist who can do all these things on request.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I use Eddie Sharam, who has proven to be really flexible. I send him insane ideas, and he goes, yeah, whatever. I mean, I get a lot of compliments on the PAM book.
Yeah, it has these two side by side, so I'm still halfway through, but I'm using it while I'm implementing certain PAM policies, and so far I'm pretty satisfied with the results.
Well, I'm glad. PAM is.
Yeah.
The world desperately needed the PAM book. Sadly, that meant I had to write it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to bite the bullet on that one.
Yes.
So
I hope you all appreciate that. Anyway.
Yeah. What other books do you have in the pipeline?
Well, I'm working on a new Absolute FreeBSD. I was writing on the jails chapter when you guys called.
Oh, sorry to disturb your flow, but...
Well, yeah, I suppose since you set this up 2 weeks ago. I suppose I'll let it pass.
Yeah, this is
but-
And sorry?
Go ahead.
yeah, this is good. This is going to be a bigger book.
Yes, this will be a bigger book. I'm doing it through No Starch Press, just like the earlier Absolute FreeBSD.
How old is
Provided
the
nothing
original one?
horrible. The original is 10 years old. Or
Yeah, it's I
Sorry,
got that
second-
one.
there was a 2001 edition and a 2007 edition. So it's due.
Mm-hmm. I thought jails were going to be their own separate book.
Oh, they will.
Ah.
The reason I wrote 4 books on file systems is that they're prerequisites to jails.
Mhm.
You have to really use jails, you have to understand ZFS. You have to, or there are many tricks you can do with jails that require understanding ZFS and UnionFS. It looks like a lot of jail functionality is built on Vimage, which there are lots of books on PF out there. Unfortunately, if you're using Vimage, you have to use IPFW. And there is no book on IPFW.
There should be.
So
It's better.
Hint, hint.
Yes, I'm probably going to have to do a book on IPFW before I can write a book on jails.
Awesome. Although all my jails don't use vimage. I can do it all with the stock stuff.
Yes, yeah, many people can.
But
But
they're
for some
very
of the
a lot of cool
sophisticated
stuff you
stuff-
can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I'm going to write a book on jails, I at least need to give a nod to the Vimage tricks.
Yeah, so this one will keep you occupied through the rest of the year, or is there a timeline?
I really, well, if everything went perfectly, I would have the book done. I would have the first draft finished before EuroBSDCon.
Oh,
We all know life is not going to go perfectly.
yeah, that's true.
This is not going to happen.
Yeah. Did you include recovery time from BSD cam in your scheduling?
That's an example of life going imperfectly.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Only
I figured
afterwards.
I figure a trip to Europe usually knocks me out for a week afterwards. Between, getting life back together and getting over jet lag and
The usual.
the usual. I don't know how you people who fly to other continents all the time survive.
Yeah.
I always hear that it's getting better with age, but I'm not sure I can make that determination right now.
I just turned 50. I'm pretty sure that those people are lying.
Yeah, they just want to keep us young folks off the planes.
Oh. Apparently, I leaked the conspiracy.
Ah,
Is there anything else that you've been working on?
Let's
Or
see.
planning?
I'm always planning.
Yes, you're a schemer.
I'm a schemer. I
3 kinds of nefarious.
well, yes, but I try to make them all really yummy kinds of nefarious that people will pay me for. That's
Gelato
kind of how.
mystery.
If I did write a book on gelato, that would make gelato tax deductible.
I'm in.
Yeah. I think I may have to consider that. Oh, other things I'm working on, another crime thriller. I write fiction for because people buy it anyway.
Well, you said it helps you keep your words per minute rate up compared to writing just technical stuff, right?
Yes, if I
Recharges
write
your
just
batteries.
technical stuff, I slowly grind to a halt.
Yeah,
And
balance yourself off.
yes, the nonfiction pays a lot more. The fiction is a lot easier and faster to write. Because it seems that when you have to be factually correct, you slow down. Strange how that works.
Yeah. It's a certain level of precision needs time to get it right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
what are
that's,
the just go ahead.
I think that's all I'm working on right now.
Okay. So what are the criteria you use to decide which different topics maybe deserve a mastery book in the future?
Well, there's a few different things. One is, can I write the book? There are topics that I'm sure could benefit from a short book, but I'm a sysadmin. I'll be writing a short book on programming.
Right.
So can I write it? Is there a market for it? I do have to consider the money because, something, the Relay D book here, I spent close to 6 months on that. And I don't know that, financially that the market is there for it to pay back the time, but, you never know what is going to sell, so I take my best guess. And if I wrote a book on Tarsnap, which is also very narrow audience, and that did okay, so I figured I'd try this and see. Is it interesting? There are topics that simply that probably would be a good book, but they don't terribly interest me. NetSNMP. A lot of people use NetSNMP.
Mm-hmm.
It probably deserves a book. The world would probably benefit from the book. One day I might, if I'm stuck for ideas, I might write the book. But the topic doesn't really light a fire for me.
Right.
It doesn't make me say, oh, that would be cool. Because every time I go near SNMP, I wind up screaming in rage.
Right, yeah. Well, it might be part of a bigger book like monitoring or something. That's a small bit of that.
Yes. I've put bits about SNMP in other books. And yes, I would happily do that. And you can do nifty things. I've extended NetSNMP with shell scripts to wedge PF counters into it.
Oh.
Because you can add a MIB of your own and have it execute a shell script, which I had it run pfctl -ss pipe to wc -l. So every 5 minutes, my mostly idle firewall boxes would have a sudden spike of processes and then go idle again. But I don't know that I could in good faith recommend people do that. It's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I guess that's the other problem with writing technical books is it's, do what I say, not what I actually would do.
Yes. I have a certain higher standard that I try to hold myself to. I don't always hit that, but sometimes reality doesn't give us any good choices. We
Right.
just have a choice of awful.
How much or how much, yeah.
Yes, and I really try to steer people then towards the least awful.
Yeah, So I guess a random question I have is, especially when writing technical stuff, how do you deal with you're trying to explain something and then you realize I now need to explain this whole other unrelated thing just to provide the background for this to make sense?
Well, that's when you go and you write 4 books about file systems.
By accident, yeah.
Yes, pretty much. You take a deep breath. You step back. You figure out what needs to be said, and you grit your teeth and do it. I don't know how many of your viewers are involved, or say they've started an open source project to do something that should be simple. And they have wound up needing to write all this supporting infrastructure just to do their simple little task. How hard could it be? And the answer is, it could be a complete nightmare.
Yeah, it's almost a form of nerd sniping, right? It's like, I just want to do this little thing, but then I get down this other rabbit hole of why is this other thing that should just work not quite working the way I want it to? And then it's like, oh, I have to fix that. And then, oh, this led to this other thing. And then I'm working on the installer instead of converting all the config files in the base system to a consistent format.
Well, we'll look at FreeBSD's libarchive. It's a classic example of that. I believe his name is Tim, who's the... I'm not even going to try his last name. But he wanted to do something about FreeBSD's packaging system. And so he needed a library that could open and create archive formats. And he wound up completely re-implementing tar and zip and all of these other archive formats in a library, and got nowhere on the packaging system.
Yeah, it's like, so libarchive is your life now. Have fun with that.
Yes. And now mind you, when BAPT did package-ng, and I'm going to digress for just a second here, never call anything ng.
Yes.
One day it won't be. Thank you. And all of BAPT's packaging stuff is built on libarchive. It was a necessary prerequisite. So and frankly, I love libarchive and all the tools that Tim has put on top of it.
Yes, we're currently badgering Tim to add the new Z standard compression algorithm to libarchive so that we can use it in package.
Okay. Tim, I'm sorry. We all love you.
Yes.
Yeah, it started small, but it became a whole bigger monster over the years.
So sometimes that happens in books. I'm looking for an example here. My PGP book, for example. I wanted to do an article, and it wound up being a book. You live with it. I truly believe that if we knew what we were getting into before we started anything, we wouldn't do anything. We would stay on the couch and watch Netflix forever. Because everything is hard.
Yeah. And the chat room points out that writing is nature's way of letting you know how sloppy your thinking is.
Yes. Clear writing is absolutely clear thinking. The good news is I can think about it, I can put it on paper, and then I can, throw away the thought because it's written down for me to look at again.
Yeah, I mean, and in general, you two, with the ZFS book and the books you wrote, it's also making you a little bit of a person who knows everything after you wrote the book.
People think that.
But I guess you forget everything because you wrote everything in the book. to keep your head free of stuff.
Yes. There is a certain amount of memory shuffle that goes on, and I have at times gone looking for answers and then found out that the best description is something I wrote in one of the ZFS books.
Yeah, there's no one says that you can't refer to your own books.
Yep. I try to write the books that I wish I had before I wrote the book.
Yeah. It's been a little bit of a weird experience for me to have, a bunch of these more senior FreeBSD developers who know lots more than I do asking me questions about, am I setting this up right? I'm like,
yes.
You're smarter than me. Why are you asking me? Oh, I wrote a book.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I had a couple people that I would have thought, a couple people who have worked on the kernel code for ZFS in FreeBSD have come to me and asked me how something works. So why are you asking me? You wrote it. Or you read the code at least. What? Sysadmin is not programming.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a technical side and a very practical application side to it.
Yep. And the software authors have no idea what people really do with their work. They create something, they throw it out in the world, and well, let's see what people do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, OpenSSL started as a project for one guy to learn how to program in C.
It still is like that. Yeah.
I did not say that. But, Bob Beck's presentation on the first 30 days of LibreSSL is highly recommended.
Yeah, I guess if it's just a learning project and you put it out in the world and people start using it, you're already in trouble.
Yeah.
And
But
if you don't
we all
continue maintaining it.
Yes.
So switching gears here a little bit, you've been to those writing workshops from time to time. Can you tell us a little bit about what these are all about and what happens there?
Well, the Relay D book here is my 29th book. I've written more than a lot of people. And there are very few places I can go. There are many people who will teach writing. Your average English professor at high school or college can't teach me much. In fact, I would say most of those folks are not good at teaching writing. They're good at getting you to write things that they know how to grade, which is a totally different thing. Mm-hmm. So I go out and I study writing. There are very few people who have written more books than me who are teaching writing. So I study with Dean Wesley Smith and Chris Rouge, and between them they've written 350 books or so.
Wow.
They've won every award in their fields. And so basically I go out there and for 8 days they review my work and I write like a maniac.
And writing boot camp.
It is a writing force death march.
Okay.
The workshop's motto is eat, poop, write.
Repeat.
Because that's all you do.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but after the end, you pretty much have new material or just better material?
I've honed my skills. My goal is to make the books readable because, frankly, most computer books are awful. There is a skill to reading a computer book, your average book on the technology, because most computer books are kind of dry and dull. I believe there's a major tech publisher, and it's not No Starch. I work with No Starch, so I'll throw that in. But there's a major tech publisher who has this internal slogan that it's easier to take an engineer and turn them into an author than an author and turn them into an engineer. And that's kind of true, except it's easy. I throw the word mediocre in there a few times. You can make an author a mediocre engineer, or you can make an engineer a mediocre author. And what I really try to make my books better than that. Because there are skills to making a book readable. And that is what I work on honing.
And I guess that's why your books are so popular.
Well, I have a following, yes. But you can look at the history of computer books, and there are standouts. TCP/IP Illustrated, highly readable. Knuth, Algorithms in C, classic in the field, solidly written. But the people who can do that are few and far between. And so I have an English degree. I love books. I made my living as a sysadmin. I really am fond of the technology. So I try to put it all together.
It's a good combination, yeah, and a rare combination, I guess.
Well, it can be done, and to be fair, most technical people, once they've written, they may think they want to write a book. But most of them, once they've written a book, change their mind about writing a second. I have to give Alan credit, because he wrote 2 with me.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it was one project that we split in half. But I'm fairly sure Alan is not eager to jump into book number 3 with me on his own or at all ever.
Careful what you say now. Not especially.
Although certain other people are trying to get my help with another book. Although I haven't heard much about it lately, so I don't know if it's actually going to go anywhere.
I'm sorry.
Well, Alan is now writing more
if
source
it's only
code.
a little ZFS section in the book, then it won't be so bad.
Right.
Yeah, it always starts like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little bit.
40,000 words later.
Yeah, you poor bastard. But you know,
go ahead.
You are a joy to work with, just so you know.
He says when he said, "I'll never work with you ever again."
No, I would not encourage you to work with me ever again. That's slightly different.
Yes.
Let's just say Alan is too nice for his own good.
You know, it was fun to work together, but like you said, I think I disrupted your process quite a bit.
Do you know, the books were better as a result. There was, once you were committed, I was able to beat knowledge out of your head that simply couldn't be had any other way. I mean, I could have kidnapped Matt Aarons.
Oh, that would be a story.
We should have considered that a little bit more, honestly. But.
That's a whole different crime novel here.
No.
We have to say no because we don't want him to get, on guard about it.
Yeah. So yes, Matt, we're joking. We would never dream of kidnapping you for a third ZFS book as a co-author. This would never happen.
We promise there are no bear traps behind the podium at BSDCan.
You heard it at BSD Now.
Well, speaking of BSDCan and shifting gears a little bit, so recently you published the novel Git Commit Murder, which is based on an alternate reality version of BSDCan. How did you come up with the idea for that?
Well, do you edit this talk?
No.
The interview? No. Okay, well then I'm not going to walk over and pick up a copy. I should have had one. How did I come up with it? Because there's a genre of fiction called cozy mysteries. And these take place anywhere. I was coming home from BSD Cannes last year and came across a cozy mystery that takes place in a cupcake shop. The entire book is in a cupcake shop.
Oh,
it is a cup. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm fond of cupcakes. And there is a certain challenge, I'm sure, to writing a book that takes place entirely in one little shop with a back room. And I'm not knocking it if you like cupcake mysteries, but that's a really specific group of people who are going to buy that book.
Mm-hmm.
And, Get, Commit, Murder is a joke that's been kicking around the internet since Git. And I heard it with SVN, and I'm sure somebody said, SCCS Commit Murder. And then I was listening to the last day of BSD Cannes last year. There was an interesting argument between developers of two different BSDs on locking models in the kernel. How to lock. What's the right way to do it? What's the best way to do it? And we get really intent. We care passionately about doing the right thing. And sometimes sometimes very intelligent people who are highly educated can have widely divergent opinions on the same thing and get really passionate about it. And at the end of that particular discussion, I would not have been shocked to see, well, okay, this is Canada, so nobody was going to pull a gun. But I would not have been shocked to see someone pull out a fresh-baked beaver tail and start hitting the other one over the head. So all you need for a murder mystery is passion. And the BSD community, frankly, is some of the most passionate people I know.
Yep.
There is no question that they care a lot. They give up their parts of their lives, their weekends. Some of these open source developers they work all day at these tech jobs that many of them run 60 hours a week or more, 80 hours. And then they go home and they write code to make the world a better place. You don't do that unless you really, really care. Maybe you do your own little standalone thing when you feel like it. And a few people, pull your library into their work, and that's cool. But to work with a large group of other people on a shared common vision takes real passion. And that's what people kill for.
Yeah. That's the negative side, I guess.
Yes. So I would like to end with an passionate plea of my own. You're all smart people. Please don't kill each other.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I very highly recommend the novel. It is very enjoyable. Even if you've never been to BSD Cannes, but if you have, you'll get that much more out of the story. If you've been to any tech conference, you'll recognize all the archetypes and everything, and it'll make perfect sense.
Yes, for the record, there are no real people in that book. However, we fall into groups. We fall into archetypes. I met Andrew Fresh and Peter Hessler at Ohio Linux Fest.
I saw the picture.
They spoke. They had the same speech patterns as the two of them. So yes, I took a picture, but there is a reason that there's the stereotype of the chubby, balding computer engineer, because we are.
Yes. Actually, I think even someone that tuned into the show for, I think, the first time since Benedict joined earlier today in the chat room was like, when I first looked at the screen, I thought Alan just had 2 shots of him.
No. It's the difference is clear. Benedict has a blue shirt. I have a yellow shirt. You have a gray shirt.
Yes.
Obvious difference.
That's how we coordinated. Yeah.
Good.
Well, Benedict had an interesting story about this the other day he sent me. And a viewer wrote in
what was that?
A viewer from your brother's class wrote in.
Oh, yeah. Right. So he wrote, apparently he liked the show very much, which is nice, of course. And he wrote my brother about, hey, it's nice and a great show. And I love how you, do the interview each week and all this stuff. And my brother was like just forwarding me that message. And it's like, yeah, but he didn't pick the right person to write to that. Like,
so a student in Benedict's brother's class thought it was Benedict's brother that did the show with me.
Well, you never know.
Well, you could do a substitution one week and see if anyone notices.
No one will notice, yeah, because people always, when we were working at the same department where I'm still working, so people were like, did you reply to that mail I sent you? I was like, what, me? You didn't send me an email. And you got mixed up all the time. But if you ask my mother, she's like, you don't look the same at all. How could people mix you up? And I guess it's similar with me and Alan, although we have, other differences. But yeah, there are some similarities that are, they're still there.
So there are no real people in that book. Yes, I stole little bits from people, but I mixed them up. I used archetypes. I'll be doing the same thing when I write a sequel eventually.
Ooh, there's a sequel?
There will be, but cozies are hard.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my fiction has some degree of violence in it. I suppose I'm just an inherently violent person. And
he's tried to kill me with a butter knife.
Oh, that was for your own good.
Yes.
It's a different way of expressing that violence.
Yes. So, a cozy, you don't get to do any explicit violence. You have to have a certain gentleness to it, and it's real easy to get wrong. So I'm writing a couple things with flying teeth and severed arms and other fun stuff before going back to cozy.
Okay. Well, kind of an unrelated question, but getting back to BSDCan a little bit, you're on the program committee for BSDCan, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I was on my first program committee for VBSDCon, which is coming up in a little bit, and we just finished reviewing the first set of papers, and I wonder if you could give us some tips about the process that goes into deciding which papers to accept and so on.
Well, there's paper acceptance at a conference is kind of, no two conferences are alike, even at the same conference.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time at BSDCan, we had trouble getting enough papers to fill slots. And if you had submitted a paper that was adequate or better, we would accept you. And there were some years that we had to track down people and beat proposals out of them. Over time, the conference has gotten more and more popular. And a few years ago, we hit this critical tipping point where we had more good papers than we could accept, which was kind of cool. You realize when you're reading conference proposals that you really don't know anything. I follow the BSD community a lot. And half of the really good proposals we got for BSDCan, I realized I didn't know anything about these people, their project, even though it had been going on a while, even though some of this stuff had been committed. I had no clue this was happening. So your average conference committee, average member has no idea who you are when you submit. We made a point for BSDCan. We have Peter Hanstein for OpenBSD, and we have GNN for FreeBSD, whose job it is to look at paper from their community. Because in theory, someone who lives mostly in those little bubbles should have a better grip than a generalist like myself. And should know who, because what we don't want to do is accept a paper that looks really good as a proposal but turns out to be from a known crackpot, because it happens. Mm-hmm. There are people out there with interesting ideas. Okay. And there are people out there who, they create projects without really knowing what they're doing. So now, mind you, creating a project is a great way to learn what you're doing. So I would encourage you to pick something you don't know anything about and get into it. But that doesn't mean you should be presenting at a conference about it yet. So BSDCan, we pretty much have papers down to a science. Dan has set up a web system that we use to submit papers and review them, and everyone gets a vote. We talk about some border cases. Sometimes we adjust things. For example, this year I had submitted a tutorial on ZFS and a 1-hour talk on the OpenBSD web stack. And I'm willing to give them both, but if I bailed on the tutorial, someone who otherwise couldn't come to BSDCan had submitted a tutorial that was rated like a 1/4 point less than my ZFS tutorial. So we wanted that person to come, and so we threw my tutorial over the side, but I'm giving it at EuroBSDCon. So you can go to Paris and learn about ZFS. We do a little bit of fiddling with, we want to make sure that all of the projects are pretty well represented. Now, mind you, that doesn't always help. We always have a couple people who, where we know the speaker, we know they'll give a good talk, but they submitted a 2-sentence proposal, and we can't accept that because we have all of these long, detailed proposals that we know that are also from good speakers, and we know we can take those. So what we really need is now it's like a 5-day BSDCan.
Okay.
Yeah, I would go to already BSDCan now has 4 concurrent talks instead of 3 to fit a couple more talks.
Right. In. Right. So we want to make sure we represent that we give opportunities to every BSD project that shows up. We have a bunch of open BSD talks, a bunch of free BSD. We have this year we have more NetBSD talks than we have ever had before.
Oh, good.
Which is good, because I remember them apologizing at the end of last year because they had 0 NetBSD talks at BSDCan because they didn't submit any.
Yes. David Maxwell is our NetBSD representative for BSDCan, so I'm going to publicly thank him, and I'm just going to arbitrarily assign him all the credit for getting those papers in. So thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
And, really, the committee can... The committee takes up time, but it's a great view into the community.
And at the end, there's something for everyone, I guess. I think a couple of years ago, you had a blog post about how you, select those talks. What are your criteria?
Yes. And I posted that. I relinked to that on Twitter every time the BSDCan call for papers opens. Because I still stand by that as things people screw up on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's, every so often to this day, someone submits a paper that says, I have this great idea, but I don't even want to tell the conference committee what the paper is because it's a surprise.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure it's brilliant. And in all fairness, some of those people have gotten that talk accepted at other conferences based on based on their name or contacts or something. But we're getting enough really good papers. We have to be really careful.
Yeah, like with VBSDCon, the first thing I noticed was 3 days before the deadline, we didn't have enough talks for a conference. By the deadline, we had twice as many as we had slots. And by 3 days after the deadline, we had a couple more.
Oh.
Yep.
Why does everybody have to wait for the last minute?
Because that is what we do. I made it a point when I decided to go to EuroBSDCon this year. I haven't been to Europe in 4 years, and it is a direct flight from Detroit.
Ooh.
And I have been to Paris twice before. So even if I have they gave me special pills to let me survive the flight without a heart attack. Even if I have some of those lingering in my system when we get down, I'm fairly confident that I will not, end up in the Seine floating on top of my laptop bag.
With a half-written novel in it, yeah.
Yeah. Trying to remember French for help. So we'll give that a try and see. But if I don't make it to the con, you know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think
Something yet.
the more surprising parts I found about being on the program committee were trying to separate my own biases out. Not just reject this paper because I think that idea is silly. Maybe if everybody else likes it, but I don't. And then the other one was a particular talk that I really wanted to see, and most other people were more ho-hum about it. And I was like, no, we really, really have to have this one. It's like we need a veto system somewhere.
Yes. Well, and that's part of being in a committee. And that's something a lot of us technical people need to work on just in general. You're part of a team, and your goal is to make the best, most awesome conference ever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, VBSDCon, VeriSign, I believe, sponsors that. And they want to they're doing that to give back to the community, which is great. That's wonderful. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But They want it to be a really kick butt conference.
Yeah, and it's quite a bit different because it's only a single track for the 2 days. So there were only going to be 10 slots, although I think we're going to stretch it to 12 by making people stay later each night.
Okay.
Because, if you came all the way up for the conference, we might as well give you as much content as we can for your $1.
Well, it's 2 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that's a good, solid 8-hour day plus lunch in the middle. It'll be a long day, but you should do that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was very interesting because there were so few talks. I went around and was actually like arm twisting people to submit talks. And then they did. And then we ended up with 3 times as many talks as we needed. And this became... then it was like, well, I'm going to feel kind of bad about the people I arm twisted if we don't accept their talk.
Yes. And yet you never know. I want to say there's always that last rush of proposals, except when there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you never know.
Well, the good thing about it means I don't have to give one.
Yes.
But you'll be still at the conference because you're part of the committee.
I'll be there, but I won't have to do anything, which will make it twice as much fun.
Yes. And see, as a member of the BSDCan committee, I feel no obligation whatsoever to help volunteer run the video cameras or pack the bags for attendees, which BSDCan can use those volunteers still. There is a mailing list for BSDCan volunteers. But if you show up the night before the conference, they would love to have you help stuff bags earlier in the day.
Yeah. Or each morning help carry crates of power supplies, power cables and stuff in.
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
They're always looking for people to carry things.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but helps a lot. Speaking of BSDCan, which is in like 2 weeks or so, can you tell...
The goat buff will be 2 weeks from yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there are any first-timers listening to this one, can you tell us a little bit about what to expect in the newcomers orientation and mentorship session on Thursday?
Well, the night before the conference proper begins, BSDCan proper runs Friday and Saturday with the main talks. There are 2 days of tutorials before that, but if it's your first time at BSDCan or any technical conference, it can be kind of overwhelming. You look around and go, who are these people? You get inundated with about 200 names in the space of 3 minutes. Where is everything? You're probably more interested in one BSD project over another. So what we do with the newcomer session is the night before the conference. If you've been to BSDCan before, we encourage you to show up. If it's your first time at BSDCan, we encourage you to show up. And I talk for about 5 minutes on what BSDCan is and things you should look for. And then we try to attach newcomers to old-timers so that there is someone there that you know and that you can go up to this person and say, help, I'm lost. You can walk up to any of the old-timers and say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm mostly interested in this. And the old-timers who have been there before are there specifically to help you. Even if, like last year when we ran this, I saw one of the head FreeBSD guys walking a newbie over to a couple of the OpenBSD guys and basically say, he wants to talk to you. It was a pleasure to meet you. Come by and say hello. And, ask me for questions on the conference, but they're the ones you really are interested in technically. So it is about connecting people together so you don't get lost. Because when you have all of those tracks and all of those people, it can be very overwhelming. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible to wade in and enjoy yourself and fill your brain so you want to come back.
Yeah, it's, I remember my first BSD can. I think I actually met 4 people out of the 300 and something that were at the conference. I did a very bad job. I was with one person I knew, and I just hung out with them the whole time, and I didn't really do what I should have. But then at my next conference, I met Michael Dexter, and he kind of introduced me to people and helped me branch out and find the right people to talk to get to geek out about the topic I wanted to talk about. It made a big difference in getting me all excited into this stuff.
Exactly. And, if we were sociable, we'd be in sales.
Right.
We would not be sitting there typing over our keyboards in uncomfortable chairs until we ruin our backs and have to buy the expensive chairs. But just for a new person coming to the conference, yes.
Yeah, that's the session.
Yes. For a new person coming, I ask the old timers to stand up, and I ask the newcomers to look around, and any one of those people who is standing up is volunteering to guide a newbie. And sometimes it's as simple as, where do I go for dinner? Where is this? Who is that? Who could I talk to about this? You don't have to have all your questions in that first hour, and you better ask them all, or you're sunk and that's it forever. No, you want to know who is eager to help you, because there are folks at any of the BSD conferences who are very happy to hook you up and give you pointers and will happily invite you to dinner. Because the real work of a conference, of course, happens after the committee does all its work and has selected all the papers. The papers are kind of secondary. The real work is in the hallway and in the evenings.
Yeah, well said.
It's the papers are the excuse to get everybody there, but really it's about having the people you want to talk to be in the same room and having much higher bandwidth conversations than you can over the internet.
Yes. I've seen so many conversations online go awry, and you get the two people together in one room for 1 minute, and the whole argument dissolves.
Mm-hmm. And I think it also can just prevent future ones. Just once you've met a person in person, you tend to, when you read their emails, you kind of hear it in their voice and accent when you're reading.
I have the same,
and it makes
that's true.
A big difference of how you view what they're saying. And suddenly they have more benefit of the doubt than they had when they were just some random person on the internet.
Yes. Well, and you learn things like so-and-so is sarcastic. So-and-so is very serious. When this person speaks, you ought to listen, because they've been there and they've seen some stuff.
Yeah, for me, the very first time I went to conferences, I didn't know anyone, and then I saw their badges with the names, and it's like, oh, from the writing style and the mailing list posts, I was like, oh, this person is such and such old or has such and such age, and it's like, oh, I didn't know he was so young, or I didn't know he was so old. I had a totally different imagination of what that person would look like.
Yes. And that is one of the wonderful things about the internet. I mean, I think the classic story is Aaron Swartz working on RSS when he was 14, and he was making valuable contributions, and nobody knew that he was 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can happen. Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the later last minute things that came up with BSDCan is the work in progress BOF that you're going to have. Could you give us an idea what this is about and maybe do a call for people?
Yes. If you're doing something that you think is clever or interesting, but maybe it's not ready for a paper, or maybe you're looking for more help or just more exposure, we're doing a works in progress session. I believe it's Friday at 5 p.m. And you get a period of time, 1 to 5 minutes. You get to stand up in front of the room. There are no other talks running at that time. And so people are either there for the whips or they've left. And you get to present your work, 1 to 5 minutes. I'll be chairing that. I will be enforcing the 5-minute deadline. And I will gleefully cut you off if you run over it. So please rehearse your talk, and I mean it on 5 minutes. So, but this is your opportunity to show your cool new thing. And send your proposal to WIP at bsdcan.org. I need slides before midnight the day before. And tell us what you're doing. Maybe you can either get some help or maybe other people can save you a lot of trouble.
Yeah, this session is always very good at Age of BSDCon, so I look forward to the one at BSDCan because there'll be a lot more people.
Hopefully. I have received 0 proposals so far.
Oh, well, I'll send one then.
Of course, it's nowhere near the deadline, so I'm not expecting any.
Yeah, there's still time.
And
so midnight the day before, you'll get lots.
Oh, yeah. I fully expect that I'll be flooded with them and have to choose. So include your time period. If you need 2 minutes, I would much rather have 32-minute talks than 12 5-minute talks. Mm-hmm. So this is about exposure.
Yeah, like you said, being on the programming committee, there's all these little things people are working on that you didn't know about, and this is a great way to just get a very quick brain dump of this.
Yep, and I'm the one choosing. So if you're submitting, cater to my biases.
Gelato.
I can be bought. Maybe not for a whip slot, but just generally I can be bought.
Okay, yeah, we'll look forward to that one. So going back to a little bit to the whole author and book writing thing, have you ever thought about branching off into a new genre like children's books or medieval fantasy novels?
I try real hard not to. I have some large fiction projects I wish to complete. And the sad thing is, readers don't cross genres very easily. I have a few people who read everything I write. And I adore those people, just so you know. So people like Josh and Kurt, thank you, Adam. But the problem is I can name them all, and that's not a career.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to get a bit of a name for science fiction. I'm starting to get a bit of a name for mystery and crime. If I branch out and start doing other things, then each of those requires its own care and feeding. And I'm committing to keep doing that to build a name. Now, I have done some strange things. I wrote a romance novella that was pretty well received.
See?
So the odds of me going back to that are not great, but I learned a lot doing it. Because writing is kind of like anything in computers. You learn by doing. You learn by failing. You learn by screwing up again and again and again until finally the only thing that's left is how to do it right.
Right.
So,
yeah.
and I think if I wrote a children's book, really, it would be full of flying teeth and severed limbs. And kids
Yeah,
are not, no.
That wouldn't carry over well.
No.
But just remembering that there's a postmortem on debugging some problem with Python on Mac and BSD or something, and it was written up in medieval fantasy style. Do you remember that one? It was very humorous.
That was brilliant. I was jealous.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see if I can find that and send you the link, because you should put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in our show notes from the episode where I read most of it.
Oh, you did?
But that was a long time ago, so we should find it again, because I can't even direct you to which episode that was off the top of my head.
Right. It was brilliant. Great. Yes. Sadly, I don't have the link here, but dear author of that, it was brilliant. Mm-hmm. I am jealous. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with the genres and fields I have now. There's enough computer topics out there to keep me busy the rest of my life. I will do another Git murder book. Probably set this one at a conference much like Penguicon in Detroit.
Ah, there you go.
Because I can... The BSD community isn't that large. If I start killing people left and right... Yeah,
they will be missed, yeah.
They will be missed, yeah.
Yes.
And while...
Plus, Penguicon has a broader focus on a couple different areas, and it would allow you to cross some of those together in very interesting ways.
Yes, it would. And they're just as full of archetypes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we should drag Michael Lucas to FOSDEM one time.
Oh, that would be amazing.
A whole different set scale. Of archetypes. All of the Linux archetypes.
Yes, I'm sure
the free
there.
archetypes.
I've been to more than one Linux event. I was a few weeks ago. I went to Kansas for Kansas Linux Fest. Nicely run con. They even gave me a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So
see?
There's my. Yep, Kansas Linux Fest. There you go. So I'm trying to do one new event a year. Not add a recurring event, just something different every year.
Well,
because
FOSDEM
I'm supposed to shamelessly...
interesting because it's mostly developer focused, right? It's the Free Open Source Software Developers European Meeting.
Yes.
And there's over 3,000 people and no registration.
Yep.
It's free.
Oh, and no registration.
No registration. I think because fire code means they couldn't actually legally have that many people in the building at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Or something. But it's also because you have the privacy nuts and so on, so nobody knows what your name is. There's no money. You just show up.
Well, I'm not a developer.
Right.
And that is sadly something I could not fly to Europe on my own dime, I'm afraid. Not right now.
But if you wanted to stand behind the FreeBSD Foundation table and explain FreeBSD to Linux people,
I'm sure something can be
That's
arranged.
what I was doing last year.
They probably would.
Yes,
I try to avoid tapping the foundation for sponsorship because I'm not a FreeBSD contributor. Strictly speaking, I am a commercial exploiter of BSD software. And Having said that, I did request them to sponsor me for BSD Cam in England
Well,
because I'm working on the absolute FreeBSD.
yeah, I think we're getting the good side of the bargain there. So
Yeah, that's another
Yes,
conference
yes,
where
but-
murders can happen in the English countryside.
The English countryside is the traditional place for murders.
Right.
You know,
Like Agatha
I've
Christie and
read a
all.
lot of Agatha Christie. Yes, exactly. Go watch BBC TV. You know, Midsummer Murders, Father Brown, all of that good stuff.
Mm.
And they're also genteel about it. And their scones. I think a good murder would really be nice at BSD Cam.
yes.
What you need there is someone. The trick is you're going to have to murder someone who's not integral to the community.
Right.
No, not a developer. Maybe someone who's just showing up to look around and take notes.
We'll make a list.
Which castle are you
yeah.
sleeping in?
Yeah.
Which of the castles are you sleeping in?
I don't have room reservations yet.
Okay.
I
had
really need to do that before BSD can.
Mhm.
And yes, if you start a new conference, please make it more than one letter different from an existing conference.
Yes.
Thank you.
Especially
If-
sequential letters. That's really
Yes.
pushing it.
M and N. Come on, Robert. I know it's clever and all, but what were you thinking?
Yeah, you can tell him in person.
We mostly
Oh,
just
I
call
will.
it Cambridge, but yes.
But renaming a conference after it has been established for a couple of years is, guess, much more difficult.
I'm
We'll
not
see.
the one who has to do the work, so I don't care.
I think this
Also
year
true.
the designated residence is St. Catherine's. I stayed there 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's actually a castle.
It is. Oh.
Yes.
I'm actually going to be taking my wife with me. We've never been to England.
So you probably won't stay in a dorm then.
Probably not. But what I really need to do is contact them and ask if they have anything for that.
Yes.
Because it's England. I'm sure they've experienced this kind of problem before in the, 700-year history of Cambridge?
Cambridge
guess they prepared,
University
Yeah.
turned 800 years old a couple of years ago when we were there.
How foolish of me.
It's
Well,
older than
I'm
the country I live in.
yeah. I'm an ignorant American. I know nothing.
Well, was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we let you go?
I think I've sucked up an hour and a half of your time.
1 hour and
So-
18 minutes so far.
1 hour and 18 minutes. Yes, and
12
your
more to go.
listeners are going to kill you.
No.
So
They're going to
the
gobble it
smart
up.
thing to do is
Not more than usual.
okay. No, just I'll see you. And if you're watching this, I should see all of you people out there in the World Wide Web. Yes, show up to BSDCon.
Yep. Or EuroBSDCon.
EuroBSDCon. Show up at a BSD conference on your continent. If there isn't one on your continent, start one.
Yep,
If you
that's
live
a
in
good idea.
Antarctica,
There
If you
are
live in
FreeBSD
Antarctica-
developers in Antarctica right now. I know this for a fact. So,
Arctic BSDCon, it's a nice name.
yeah, make this happen. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming on and giving us this interview.
Always a pleasure.
All right, see you at BSDCon.
See ya.
and cut. But yes,
Okay.
Nathan
good.
Whitehorn is at the South Pole collecting neutrinos or something and using FreeBSD to store the data.
They parachute us in, yeah.
No, he flew in
Awesome.
on some kind of plane, but yeah.
Yeah.
He's doing real science at the South Pole and using FreeBSD to do it.
Cool. That,
See?
well,
It's-
when he gets back, we should get him to do a talk.
Yep.
whether you interview him or he goes to a conference. Well, they have internet in the South Pole.
Yeah.
You can have him as a guest.
It's mostly satellite though, so the latency is not great.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to catch him in person.
Because I think how it actually works is they're allowed to upload 200 gigabytes a day of data or something during a window when they have the satellite. So they use FreeBSD to buffer everything, pick the interesting bits out, and then stream those back to the mainland during their window.
Okay.
That's a conference
Okay.
talk.
Generally,
right
they
there.
want to try to store everything, so they store it on FreeBSD, and then they just stream the interesting bits back for everybody else.
Right. And then they pick up the discs and
Fly them back.
carry by boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or ship. Or plane.
Mm-hmm.
Thingy.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thanks again.
Sure. Anytime. Happy to. And I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Keep writing, and
Yeah.
we'll see each other sooner than
Yep.
later.
And how do I hang this up?
I'll
Okay.
do
The
it.
red button.
Oh, that's what that noise is. I can still hear myself. God damn it.
Ooh.
Okay. Now that it's been 2 hours, we can start the show.
Yeah. What do you think
Yeah.
of the titles?
The first one.
That's the yeah. I thought so.
Yes. As for the news, we will just try to go briskly along.
Could even put that one up with Michael for the week where we are at BSDCan. But we'll record another one next week.
Yes. We didn't think of that, did we? We must
Yeah.
get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Because otherwise we have to record
Actually,
one.
yes.
Should do that
That interview was long enough. It could
for
probably
for one whole
mostly be a
episode.
standalone episode.
Yeah, that's what
So
I'm
if we
saying.
don't use the interview in this week's episode, the next
And
week
use it-
we record a regular episode and then just the bumpers and stuff around Michael's interview.
Yeah.
And ship
And
that
it's a good
for
it's a good
that
teaser.
week.
And that's yeah. I mean, we referred to it in like 2 weeks or so. There's something in BSDCan.
Yeah, so it's
but
2 weeks is when we'd air it. So what I mean is we'd have to make sure the title for this week doesn't talk about the interview if we're not going to actually
right.
air the interview this week.
Then we find another one.
Yes. And take interviewing
a-
Michael W. Lucas out of the description.
Yeah.
Because yes, since that was over an hour, we can just pad it out with a preamble
usual.
and a postamble, and then we will
And then
have
people
a
have
whole
something to watch.
episode for the BSDCan week without me having to, without us having to record an extra 2 hours worth of stuff next week.
Yeah. Well, we could do that, but yeah, it's easier that way.
Well, we can maybe even just do a reduced one, like I don't know, one story and some feedback or something. Whatever it takes to pad it out. But with an hour and 18 minutes of interview, it shouldn't be difficult to hit 90 minutes of episode.
The usual mark, yeah. Yeah, and I guess people would like that in before BSDCan to, get the spirits.
Yeah. It might be a bit late for some people getting on the plane. Well, it'll come out on the Friday, so people will be at BSDCan, but it'll be fine. So yeah, I think maybe the best thing to do for next week for the second episode would be intro, that
The interview,
the ad, and
sponsors.
that So intro, a little bit talking, sponsor, the interview, sponsor, like
One
quick
feedback
Beastie
question.
Bits type thing, and then squeeze the last bits in.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
So now we need your title.
So, are you ready to actually start?
Yeah, so we just skip the title for now and just go start with the usual.
And recording.
BSD Now, episode 195, recorded on the 25th of May, 2017. Yeah. Okay, let's redo that.
Sorry, did we pass midnight at your side? Because it's only the 24th here.
Oh, no, it's still right. The date says 23rd.
No,
Okay.
It's the 24th.
Yeah, I had to fix that. Okay. One more time.
So, reset everything. And recording.
BSD Now, episode 195, recorded on the 24th of May, 2017. Hi, I'm your host, Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we have another one, a great episode prepared for you today. And we should get right into our headlines this week, which is a connection to a previous episode we did about the INO 64-bit project in FreeBSD. That one hit the FreeBSD current tree a couple of hours ago, I guess.
Yep, last night basically, or yesterday. So right, the INO 64 project, which was the project to change the storage type in the kernel for inodes from a 32-bit integer to a 64-bit one. And that's now been merged into FreeBSD 12 current. So as per the description there, it extends the INO type, the dev-t type, the nlenc type, all to be 64-bit integers. It modifies the struct dirent, which is a directory entry, layout to use the d-offset type, and increases the size of the D file number type to 64 bits as well. And this means that the size of the D namelen is now 16-bit, so that you can have a longer name. And all the other required changes for that. Slightly unrelated change, but the most important one for me personally is changing struct statfs mount from name and mount to name to be mnameline is now 1024 instead of 80 or 88. So this means the maximum length of the name of a directory that you can mount something on top of has been increased from 88 bytes to 1024 bytes. So now when you create a really long dataset name inside a jail that has a long host name or something, you'll no longer get that error that the name is too long. You'll be able to actually mount a dataset even if the name of the parent is already beyond 88 characters. So this solves a problem with Poudriere where you end up with, if the name of your jail was too long, then the datasets that mounted underneath them would end up being too long and it would cause errors. All that is done and committed now.
Oh, great.
So that also means that you can now have more than 4 billion files stored on a single file system, whether that's UFS or ZFS, which, especially for some of the UFS and related file systems like some of the appliances use, where you could have petabytes of storage, having a limit of 4 billion files actually means that even with modestly sized files, you can run out. The other problem is it also helps with NFS. NFS has supported 64-bit file numbers for a long time, but FreeBSD only used the first 32 bits of it. So Amazon's EFS, or Elastic File System, which is basically their cloud version of NFS, uses 64-bit IDs. So if you tried to mount an Amazon NFS mount in FreeBSD in AWS, you could get some weird problems. Even if you had, on FreeBSD, it starts numbering the files from 1 or 0 or whatever. But for Amazon, they would, I think they were actually counting up from where they started or whatever. And so it meant you would get IDs that were higher and it wouldn't work properly. But now that's fixed.
Great.
One of the reasons why this project took so long is they put a lot of effort into making this less breaky than it was going to be. So the ABI breakage is mitigated by providing compatibility using version symbols. So if the userland app is older, it will use a version of the libc stuff that's 32-bit still instead of 64-bit. The ingenious use of the existing padding in the structures to allow those numbers to be bigger without overwriting other values, and by employing a bunch of other tricks. Unfortunately, not everything can be fixed, especially problems that exist outside the base system. For instance, any third-party APIs which pass a struct stat around are going to be broken in backwards and forwards incompatible ways. So that means a lot of packages are going to have to be rebuilt. This led to the discovery of a bug in Poudriere where it wasn't forced rebuilding Perl when it should have. And that's being fixed now. So when you do a package upgrade, it should detect the change in the ABI and force the... When you do a package upgrade, it will detect that Perl is going to be different now and reinstall it for you. There is a note if you're updating, right, especially if you're following -current. You need to follow the instructions in the updating file very closely. Normally, there's a bunch of shortcuts you can take, but you want to not do that in this case because of the degree of the change will lead your system to be unbootable. So use your ZFS boot environments for sure, just in case. But you want to build and install your new kernel, and that new kernel needs to have the compat_FreeBSD11 option enabled. Otherwise, you won't provide the backwards compatibility with the older binaries. Then after you install the new kernel, you have to reboot before you install the new world. So you want to be running on the new kernel before you install the new world, because all that new world stuff is going to depend on the new system calls installing that only exist in the new kernel, and you could mess things up pretty badly if you don't do it exactly in that order. You also want to do a completely clean build, so no, -d, no clean, and you want to clear out user obj before you start. The updating instructions have all been updated to reflect that. And they have a long list of credits. This project's been underway for quite a long time. Started life many years ago as a project from Gleb Kurtzu, who did the PEFs, the personal encryption file system as well. Then Kirk McKusick picked it up and has updated the patch and has acted as chief flag waver to push this forward. And we got many feedback, suggestions, and discussions with Ed Mast, John Baldwin, Giles Tokler, and Rick Macklem. And then Chris Moore performed an initial ports investigation and got it working over there on the TrueOS side. And then we had an exp run from Antoine Brodin of the FreeBSD project. And then the essential and all-embracing testing was done by Peter Holm. And then the final heavy lifting of coordinating all those efforts and bringing the project to a close and actually getting the AVI stuff and all the little hacks together was done by Konstantin Belousov, or Kib, at freebsd.org. And EdMass and Kib's time was sponsored by the FreeBSD Foundation.
Yeah, so thanks for all the people who did the work on that one. And it's in FreeBSD Head now, so people can check it out and find bugs and, test it out and see whether it works for them or not. And yeah, it's a nice project. It's been a long time, but I guess it's coming to a good end now. Okay, our next story is about why I love OpenBSD. So this one pretty much declares the love for OpenBSD and their operating system. So it starts off with, I do love open source software. Oh boy, I really do love open source software. It's extendable, auditable, and customizable. What's not to love? I'm astonished by the idea of that tens, hundreds, and sometimes even thousands of enthusiastic, passionate developers collaborate on an idea. Together they make the world a better place, bit by bit. And this leads me to one of my favorite open source projects, the 22-year-old OpenBSD operating system. So it continues with the origins of my love affair with OpenBSD. In 1993, when I turned 6, we've got our first computer, a Laser 286-2X. It came blasting in with 2 processors, a 45 megabyte HDD, and a few megabytes of RAM. 4 megabyte if I recall correctly, but the details are a bit vague there. It features MS-DOS, WordPerfect 5.1, and a bunch of entertaining games. But from the first eyesight on, I was more interested in the inner workings of the device. I quickly became a master of MS-DOS, QBasic, and later on Windows for Workgroups 3.11, which I got from a teacher at my elementary school. Years later, I exchanged elementary school for high school and quickly befriended Gil, who was a geek like I was. He introduced me to Red Hat with KDE 1.0. At the time, I was unfamiliar with the concept of open source, and this got me hooked from the first second. I can't exactly remember the order, but I switched a lot of distributions from that moment on. SUSE, Mandrake, and eventually ended up with Slackware. Once the notion of open source fully sank in with me, I began to feel blessed. Blessed to be using the product of thousands of volunteers worldwide. It was a true honor. And then he describes a little bit his journey from Linux to BSD. From that moment, I spent nearly all my spare time on IRC channels and Usenet, gathering knowledge, participating in discussions, and exchanging ideas. Yeah, this a typical path. I heard that a lot of times from people. Somewhere along the way, I read about BSD. But how it was not another Linux distribution, but a completely different operating system with different goals, ideas, and less organic growth. I flirted with FreeBSD first, but it didn't felt right, so I switched back to Linux. But then I stumbled upon OpenBSD. It wasn't love at the first sight, perhaps. I was accustomed to Linux too much just to make the switch. However, I did install a dual boot, OpenBSD and Linux, and began liking it more and more as weeks progressed, right out of the point where I ditched Linux in favor of OpenBSD. He goes on to describe a little bit more about the advantages of OpenBSD. So just from the headlines here, it's extremely secure, it's well documented, it's open source, it's neat and clean, and he also has a nice little tattoo made on his upper arm, I guess, yeah, of Puffy, and that's a nice devotion to an operating system. And he closes basically with, my take on OpenBSD is, I use OpenBSD on a daily basis as my desktop operating system on network equipment and on most of my servers. It might not be the best choice for every situation, since it doesn't run complex software written solely for Linux or Windows. I have to use Linux for some of the hosting platforms I manage because of these compatibility issues. But aside from those particular situations, I have a blatantly preference for OpenBSD. If you're new to computers, OpenBSD serves as an excellent starting point. It will help you better understand how your computer works. If I could go back in time and begin my experience with computers with OpenBSD, doing so would be a no-brainer. If you're ready to get started with OpenBSD, here are the installation instructions, and they are linking directly to the OpenBSD FAQ where that begins. And we'll have that also in our show notes. So yeah, it's a nice article about, how people get started in not only computers, but also different operating systems, and then finally finding the one that they want to use for the rest of their lives, basically.
Yep. So this week's episode of BSD Now is brought to you by DigitalOcean. If you go to digitalocean.com, you can use their very nice control panel to spin up a virtual machine in under 55 seconds, running FreeBSD 10 or 11 with UFS or ZFS for as little as $5 a month or 0.7 cents per hour. If you enter the coupon code FreeBSD Now, they'll also add a $10 credit to your account as well, allowing you to use the smallest instance for 2 extra months or a larger instance for some time. It's a great way to be able to experiment with FreeBSD, especially since you get terabyte or more of traffic included and high-speed gigabit internet connection. So it's a great way to experiment with FreeBSD with a high-speed connection, but also to be able to host things. I use it to host a Quasal IRC bouncer so that I can stay on IRC even when my computer's turned off. When I turn it back on, I get the scroll back, almost like it was, Slack or something, but better and doesn't take all my RAM.
Yeah, this is on my to-do list as well. And you can also do some nice networking tricks as well. You can run load balancers, you can have floating IPs, you can have your own DNS record or create it, and you have also a private networking option there. So that one enables droplets to talk with other droplets in the same data center, which helps you if you have a little bit more distributed application running.
Yep. So get over there and check it out. It's super easy. The control panel makes it all easy. But, if you're like me and you're not really a GUI type of person, they have a great API and some already pre-built API consumer tools. So there's a DO command line that you can use to create your droplets and destroy them and manage them all from the command line, which is text. It makes it really easy when, you have to spin up 36 different droplets in different data centers to play with.
Yeah. Check out DigitalOcean and our coupon code.
So our next story is about combating WannaCry and other ransomware using ZFS.
It's been in the news everywhere, at least the WannaCry stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a nice little story from IX Systems where they describe how you can combat that if you have the right technologies in place.
Yeah, so this is actually from our friend Michael Dexter.
Mm-hmm.
But
so
basically, ransomware attacks try to hold your data hostage using unauthorized data encryption and spreading across your files. And then once your files are encrypted, they're like, oh, hey, pay us and maybe we'll give you the decryption key. And some of these even try to encrypt what Windows calls shadow copies, which is kind of their version of snapshots. Because those are mutable, they can still encrypt those as well. Whereas with ZFS, snapshots are read-only, and so they can never modify that data. So if you back the storage on your Windows desktops at your work office or whatever with a NAS based on ZFS, then you can have snapshots. And if you create those snapshots on a regular basis, when you get infected with something like a ransomware, what you can do is freeze that file system and move it off to the side or whatever, clone your most recent snapshot, which maybe you were making every 15 minutes. So find the newest one that's not encrypted, clone that and start using that for all your work. And then you still have the up-to-the-date file system moved over to the side, and you're sharing blocks, so you're not wasting space. And you may be able to also extract the files you've changed in, say, the last half hour or the hour between when the malware started encrypting your files and when you discovered it. Right? You had to back up an hour to find all your files not encrypted, but that file you saved only 10 minutes ago, that's in the clone and maybe isn't encrypted yet, and you can manually copy it to the new good one. So it allows you to restore from a backup instantaneously while keeping the original file system around so that you can extract individual files that way.
Yeah, it's a lifesaver for some people. I mean, if they're in that situation and they're very, tempted to pay that stuff just to get their files back, which does or doesn't work, you don't know. But ZFS can be a real lifesaver because you can go back in time in your file system to get those files who were still unencrypted and save your work. And sometimes companies are really reliant on that work. And that's the only way for them to get back on track.
Yeah, so combine this with something like a virtual desktop infrastructure or virtualization based on top of a FreeNAS or a TrueNAS, and you get everything you need to protect yourself. So in their article, they described the setup in detail. They also have a case study from 2015 when ransomware was first becoming a big deal, where they actually show a customer who's saved many of their customers using this technique. It's basically the recipe you need to protect yourself, because the good thing with ZFS is the snapshots are read-only. Because of the technical way that ZFS is built, it's not possible to modify the snapshot after the fact, and that means that it cannot get encrypted. It also means it's sometimes it's more easier to detect ransomware on ZFS because it's not overwriting the files in place. It's writing the encrypted data separately. And suddenly, if your data set's twice as big as it was yesterday, that might suggest something hinky is going on. But yes, it shows that make sure you create those snapshots, and because they are super useful. I remember when the college I was consulting with got hit with a ransomware, they restored from backups, but it took them 18 hours, and basically they had to close the school for the day. And this was it in particular. It hit the medical school part of it, so it was a joint program between the college and a university to teach nursing and so on. And having all this stuff down was a big deal. I was like, well, if you just had ZFS on your storage thing instead of restoring from last night's backup, you could have reverted to a snapshot in like 10 seconds or less. Depends how long it takes you to log into the machine and type out the name of the snapshot.
And even pick out individual files from that hidden .zfs directory.
Yes. So instead of using just a rollback, what you can do is clone the snapshot and switch that to your active file system, keeping the damaged one around so that you can extract individual files that maybe were updated between when the malware started encrypting files and when you stopped it.
Yeah.
It's also been interesting to look at maybe detecting when the malware starts doing this and just marking the ZFS dataset as read-only so that it can't continue encrypting more files.
As I said, it's a lifesaver for most people, and it's running. You mean you can just make those snapshots in the background without thinking about them too much. But when you need them, you're happy that you have them.
Yes, and with the integration with Samba, you can actually expose snapshots as if they were the Windows volume shadow copy, meaning that in a Windows interface, if you right-click on a file and go to Properties, there's a Previous Versions tab, and the user can revert manually to older versions of their individual files. This means that the storage administrator doesn't have to take care of these, oh, I need last night's backup of this one file. They can actually preview and step through and pick the older versions of individual files themselves. So when it's not a malware attack or something, but just a user accidentally messes up a file or deletes it, they can always get it back.
And it's events like that where people think about their storage needs and are like, well, we don't want to be in that situation ever again. So there's also in that article a link to a free webinar from IX Systems, a co-founder Matt Olander, describing what business can do in situations like this with TrueNAS and how that can help them keep their files secure that are valuable to them, and how ZFS provides all these cool features in their TrueNAS solution. So yeah, check out the full article, and hopefully you weren't hit by the ransomware, this or any other that's around, and you have you're still in the possession of all your files. And
yes,
well,
also reminder, especially if you're running BSD, I think it was today that a new Samba version comes out with the fixes for some known vulnerabilities as well. So you might want to make sure you update your file server.
Even better, yeah.
And cut. Okay, rearranging slightly because we don't need to show that page until next week. So, do you want to do this LLDP one? I know a bit about LLDP, but you apparently know this person specifically?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, and I'll do the TED Unix story because I wrote all the notes for that one.
That works.
I have to solve a problem with my computer. My second monitor keeps blinking on and off a lot.
Oh, is that the one with the show notes, or the one where my face
is on? No, it's the one normally where the video software is, but I've moved it back to my primary monitor because when it kept blinking off, I couldn't change the website shot.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that can be annoying.
I don't know. It started when I rebooted the other day, so I might reboot again and/or update my NVIDIA driver. But it was working fine not very long ago.
So
wow, that is a bad vulnerability.
Bad one. Well, aren't all?
There's a simple workaround though, but still. Malicious clients can upload and cause the Samba server to execute a shared library from a writable share.
Oh, the fun! Yes, great stuff. I guess people will patch machines here tomorrow. Or maybe overnight. Luckily, I don't use any Samba on the big data cluster.
Right.
I could, but yeah.
Well,
no use case.
That would be that useful, yeah.
No. Do a little bit of NFS.
Okay. Close. Yes. Ready?
Yep.
And recording.
Our first little news in our news roundup section is using LLDP on FreeBSD. So this was posted on tetragear.com, and I met the person a couple of hours ago. It was a nice chat, and we talked a little bit about FreeBSD, and we mentioned also what work could be done on the network side, and he mentioned LLDP on FreeBSD. And so what LLDP is the link layer discovery protocol, and it allows system administrator to easily map the network, eliminating the need to physically run the cables in the rack. LLDP is a protocol used to send and receive information about the neighboring device connected directly to a networking interface. It is similar to Cisco's CDP, Foundry's FDP, Nortel's SONMP, etc., and it's a stateless protocol, meaning that an LLDP-enabled device sends advertisements even if the other side cannot do anything with it. In this guide, the installation and configuration of the LLDP daemon on FreeBSD as well as on a Cisco switch will be introduced. So there's a little section about the LLDP protocol itself. And it basically explains, if you're already familiar with Cisco's CDP, LLDP won't surprise you. It is built for the same purpose, to exchange device information between peers on a network. While CDP is a proprietary solution and can be used only on Cisco devices, LLDP is a standard. It's IEEE 802.3ab. Therefore, it is implemented on many devices such as switches, routers, various desktop operating systems, and so on. LLDP, etc., or LLDP helps a great deal in mapping the network topology without spending hours in cabling cabinets to figure out which device is connected in which switch port. If LLDP is running on both the networking device and the server, it can show which port is connected where. And besides the physical interfaces, LLDP can be used to exchange a lot more information, such as IP address, host name, and other information.
Yeah, that's how I've used it the one time I did. I installed it and just ran it attached to the console for a couple minutes. I was trying to figure out which switch port a machine was connected to on a switch that I didn't have access to the management interface to go and do it by MAC address. And then I think I also used it a second time where I didn't remember what the IP address of the management interface on the switch was. By using LLDP, the switch was telling all the computers plugged into it that information, what the switch's IP address was, and that allowed me to get connected to it and figure out what's going on. But it's definitely been helpful to me. I think it's the one case the switch was in a different city than the machine that was plugged into it because of a point-to-point link over transparent Ethernet. But yeah, it's a very useful protocol.
Mm-hmm. And there's a description here how to install it on FreeBSD. It's in netmanagement/LLDP, and you create a little config file called lldp.conf and use a local etc. And the blog post has a little example here where it describes what needs to be in that file. And then it has a couple of screenshots how certain commands like show the chassis details and show the neighbors, how this will look like in a typical scenario. And then you can basically start the LLDP daemon from rc.conf. And then pretty much you can also enable LLDP on a Cisco switch. There's also a little description there, and probe your devices and get a little bit more information out of them, which might be useful in your network setup. Yeah, check out the full blog post and the little examples we have in there. Yeah, it's a nice protocol to check out for people.
Yep, and it walks you through setting it up on the Cisco side as well. So you can do it either way, and then shows you how to query it from other machines and get a list of all the neighbors that you're near. And it's a great way to figure out what's where on your network and what else is out there.
I've never heard of it before, so it's an interesting thing to learn about.
Yeah, I've seen it in my switches and stuff, but I hadn't used it for a long time. And then at one point, I figured I was trying to figure it out. So I was running TCP dump on the network interface, and I saw the LLDP packets, and I was like, if I install an LLDP client, I'll be able to read those and actually see what's going on. And that's what it did.
Yeah. So yeah, check that out, and maybe there's some support on other BSDs as well. And if that's something you
it's
have
a userland program, so I think it'll work on any of the BSDs.
And yeah, if people have stories about this or have used it on other BSDs, then send us a link and we'll cover it in a future episode.
This week's episode of BSD Now is also brought to you by IX Systems. Head over to the ixsystems.com/BSD Now and get the ultimate guide to buying a server for open source. But in particular, talk to them about the next machine you want to build. They have access to a full line of Intel best processors. They can get you really small things, like even the one I got recently. I got a machine based on a Pentium G4400, which is very low end, but it's 2 cores at 3 gigahertz. But it does have ASNI and it has support for ECC memory. And the processor only costs like $75. So great for a low power NAS. Or, I've also bought like E5 2650 V5s from them before. It's like, I need the biggest machine you can build me.
The high-end servers, yeah.
Yes, so I bought literally like the cheapest processor Intel makes and up to some pretty high-end stuff. Not the top of the end because my needs don't go that high, but they have all of it.
Yeah, that's the nice thing because they custom build it to your requirements, but also tell you things that won't work together or that you haven't thought about. And because they have the expertise and build millions of, or I guess thousands of these machines for similar customer needs. And they will tell you which things work better than others.
The most important thing when talking to them is to describe what problem you're trying to solve or what you're trying to do with it, because that will actually give you it'll help them build a system that'll work better for what you want to do than if you just show up and say, I need a system with this processor and this much RAM and this type of SSD. If you tell them what you're going to do with it, they're going to be like, actually, you probably don't want that type of SSD. Or you want 2 of this type and 2 of that type because, you're going to use some for your slog and some for your L2 ARC. You want different devices.
Yeah, and they know what works together and has been used in the field. And yeah, they're the real experts in the storage area and the server expertise. Yeah.
Yep, and they're also a big part of our community. So they actually went out to Kansas Linux Fest, where Michael Lucas was as well. And you can see here's the FreeNAS table, and they had the horns that everybody likes and stickers and information about all their stuff. And you can see this little stack of Michael Lucas's books there as well, and a demo of TrueOS with the Lumina desktop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're a big supporter of some of the FreeBSD projects and the sub-projects that they have. And it's a nice
sure
way
that FreeBSD is always represented at a lot of these Linux conferences.
Mm-hmm.
They
and sponsor also a couple
BSD
of
Q&A,
conferences.
and Ken Moore also gave a talk about switching TrueOS over to OpenRC.
Yeah, so check out IX Systems and tell them you got your reference from us.
Yes. So next up, we have a story from our friend Ted Unace over at the OpenBSD project, and he's experimenting with pre-pledge.
What's that about?
He took a crack at a system similar to the one being designed for Capsicum called Oblivious Sandboxing. There'll be a presentation about it at BSDCan, so definitely check that out. Basically, where you can run an application in the sandbox without the application knowing it's in a sandbox. So currently, the way we sandbox code with Pledge or Capsicum or whatever is we go into the code and we add these restrictions. And we say, okay, open the files first and then enter the sandbox, and then you can't open any more files. Obviously, that causes a problem if the first thing your program does is try to open a file. So the little trick they use here is to pre-open the files and create a little list of these open files and spoof the open call. So then when the application says open the file, you check the little list you have, and if that file is already open, you can return the already open file descriptor, and the application can continue happily. Or if not, you give an error and be like, well, no, you're in a sandbox. You're not allowed to have access to, you only get these 4 toys in the sandbox. So Ted's article starts off, MP3 is now officially dead, so I figure I should listen to my collection one last time before it vanishes entirely. The provenance of some of these files is a little suspect, though, and since I know I shouldn't open files from strangers. I'd like to take some precautions against malicious malarkey. This would be a good use of pledge, perhaps, if we can get it working. At the same time, an occasional feature request for pledge is the ability to specify restrictions before running a program. Given some untrusted program, rapid execution in a pledge-like environment, there are other system call sandbox mechanisms that can do this, like systrace, but pledge is quite deliberately designed not to support this. But maybe we can bend it to our will anyway. So it says, our pledge wrapper can't be an external program. This leaves us with the option of injecting the wrapper into the target program via LD preload. Before the main function even runs, we'll initialize what needs initializing, then lock things down with a tight pledge set. Our eventual target will be ffplay, which is part of FFmpeg for playing videos, or audio in this case. But hopefully the design will permit some flexibility and reuse. So you can see they create this init function that loops over a list, first it hijacks the open function, remapping it to call a function called nextOpen and replacing their own function. And then it creates a list, then it grabs the environment variable pre-open, loops over it, and opens all of the files that you specify via that environment variable. Then it enters the pledge sandbox saying you're only allowed to access standard in and out, no opening files or access to anything else. Then they have this override for the open function, which when you pass it a path and the flags you want to open it with, it loops over the list of already open files. If you're asking for the same file, it returns the file descriptor for it. Otherwise, it says no and returns an error. So
Okay,
it says, in fact, we've implemented a tiny linked list file system of already open file descriptors. So it says the new code is injected to override the open system call and reads a list of files from the environment variable. As long as the application tries to open files that have been pre-opened, it can function without modification within the sandbox, or at least that's the goal. So he writes a short test program and tries to open a file that's allowed and one that's not, another that's allowed. Then he tries to be cheeky and use openat instead of open to try to get around the sandbox. And we see that he's able to open the first file, fails to open the second one, then is able to open the third one, and then it crashes when he uses a function that's not allowed, openat. And he says that's exactly what we want. The files we wanted to open, as specified by the pre-open environment variable, work just fine. Attempting to open foo.c, which is not on the list, returns an error, and attempting to subvert our safeguards by calling openat instead of open results in the hard failure. That's the default for pledge. So then he tries to actually use it with ffplay. So it says, preload with our little library here and try to open taylor.mp3. Problem is, it crashes right away. So they use ktrace and ltrace to try to figure out what happened, and it turns out the problem is using dlopen to try to open a dynamic library, and the problem there is that purposely calls the syscall directly rather than going through the wrapper where they set it up. But that's to deal with some dependencies and so on. So he creates a new wrapper function for dlopen that just returns an error. So then he tries again, and we can see it skips opening a bunch of X libraries, but then crashes anyway when it tries to do an IOCTL. So he makes all the IOCTLs fail. But when he does that, then ffplay won't play because it can't determine the active terminal. So he changes it to return a success for the one ioctl that he cares about and tries that, but then it can't open the TTY. So he plays with some more, and then it's like, oh, your display is less than 8-bit color, so that's not supported, and then it crashes, and he keeps going, but eventually gives up. So then he tries FFmpeg. He's like, maybe this will be simpler. So he runs FFmpeg with his override and with a pre-open of that one file, and tries to convert that MP3 into a WAV file. But he gets his abort trap, it doesn't work. because it tries to call it an octal for the terminal from is a TTY. So he changes the pledge set to allow the access to the TTY as well. And then the problem it has next is it tries to check the permissions on the file Taylor.wave. So he overrides the access call and changes his pre-open list so he opens both the input and the output, because obviously you can't write to Taylor.wave if you don't have it open. And eventually does get that to work. And then he uses cat to cat that wave file to dev/audio, and it plays.
Yeah, finally.
Mm-hmm. He says at this point, it's been made a point that's been made since the early days of Pledge, but I think the exercise reinforces why you can't just have a Pledge wrapper to another program. That Pledge works best with programs where you understand what the program is doing. A generic Pledge wrapper isn't of much use because the program is going to do something unexpected and you're going to have a hard time wrangling it into submission. Software is too complex. What in the world is FFplay actually doing here? Why is it opening all these X libraries when we want to just play an MP3 from the command line? Even if we were working with the source code, how long would it take to rearrange this program into something you could actually pledge? You can try using a different program, but I'd wager that as far as multimedia or multi-format media players go, FFplay is actually one of the lower ends on the complexity spectrum. Most of the trouble comes from using SDL as an abstraction layer for the graphical interface and the command line interface. And it's performing a bunch of these console operations that we'd rather not have, or you'd have to do before you enter the Pledge sandbox. On the flip side, all this early init code is probably the right design. Once SDL finally gets its screen handling set up, that's when we should apply the Pledge and sandbox the actual media decoder. That would be the right thing in this case. So yes, is Pledge too limiting? Perhaps, but that's what he wants. I could have just kept adding permissions to Pledge until FFplay worked, but it would have full access to my X socket, and what kind of sandbox is that? I don't want some naughty MP3 scraping my screen and spying on my keystrokes. The sandbox I created had all the capabilities one needs to convert an MP3 to audible sound, but the tool I wanted to use wasn't designed to work in that environment. And in its defense, there were new post hoc requirements that came up. Other programs, even said, suffer from less than ideal pledge sets as well. The best summary might be to say that Pledge is designed for tomorrow's programs, not yesterday's programs. And vice versa, right? The programs from yesterday weren't designed to be pledged, and tomorrow's programs will be designed that way. He says, there were a few things I could have done better. In particular, I gave up on getting audio to work, even though there's a nice description of how to use Pledge with the SIO open manual page. Alas, even going back and with a bit more effort, I still haven't succeeded. The requirement to use libsndio is more permissive than I might prefer. But I definitely look forward to seeing Jonathan Anderson's talk about doing this with Capsicum on FreeBSD at BSDCan.
Yeah, it goes in a similar direction, and different implementations in different projects, but still the basic idea of sandboxing is there and keeping it with as little privileges as possible. Yeah, people should check that out and try it out. There are code examples, and it's a good introduction into the whole pledging
concept. Yeah.
Okay, so our next
story is how I maximized the speed of my non-gigabit internet connection.
Sounds good.
So this is a story from Brennan Smith, who's the lead systems engineer at Ookla, which is the company that runs Speedtest.
People have used that before, yeah.
And it basically explains how he used a pfSense machine to maximize his internet connection. Goes on.
Oh, nice.
I spend my time wrangling servers and internet infrastructure. My daily goals range from designing high-performance applications supporting millions of users and testing the fastest internet connections in the world to squeeze microseconds from our stack. So at home, I strive to make sure that my personal internet connection is as fast as possible. He says, I live in an area that has a DOCSIS cable ISP that does not provide symmetric gigabit internet. My download and upload speeds are not equal. Instead, I have an asymmetric plan with 200 megabits download and 10 megabits of upload. This nuance considerably impacts my network design because asymmetrical services can cause more problems with buffer bloat. So in this case, it's because his upstream is so much smaller than his downstream, if he saturates the upstream, then he won't be able to use most of the downstream because he won't be able to send the ACKs fast enough.
Yeah, that can be a problem on asynchronous.
Yeah. So he says, we will cover buffer bloat in a later article, but in a nutshell, it's an issue that arises when the upstream network device's buffers are saturated during an upload. Right? If you're trying to send more data than you can physically send over the line, the buffer on the device will hold a bunch of packets that it's in the process of sending. And if that gets full, a new packet going on the end might take as much as 2 seconds to actually get to the front of the queue and get out over the internet.
That's a lot of time.
Yes, in computer time, 2,000 milliseconds is a lot. That's more than enough to go around the world 3 or 4 times. So you don't want to do that. And he says, and this results in overall poor quality of internet. The solution is to shape the outbound traffic to a speed just under the sending maximum of the upstream device so that its buffers don't fill up. My ISP is notorious for having buffer bloat issues due to the low upload performance, and it's an issue prevalent even in the routers they provide to the customers. So the article actually walks through how to set up the pfSense to do it all.
The routing. Yep.
They also talk about a number of different devices they looked at, like the Ubiquiti Edge routers, like ER Lite 3, ERPoE 5, ER8, ER Pro 8, and ERX, and gives you an idea of the internet speed ranges those are applicable to. So an Edge router Lite 3 is, if you're below 60 megabits, it will definitely work, but if you go above 200 megabits, it probably won't work. Whereas with an ER8, you're guaranteed to work at 160 megabits or lower, but if you go over 400 or 450, it's probably not going to work, and so on. And they have the whole range of products there. But what he actually settled on was a 15-watt x86 64-bit machine. He wanted strong support for IPv6, and that's how he ended up with pfSense. He wanted to be able to do point-to-point VPNs and a split VPN tunnel. He wanted VLAN tagging, and he wanted to create a number of separate networks. He wanted a LAN network where he can run his FreeNAS and his Zen hypervisors, a guest network for when people are over at his house, and a separate IoT network for all those devices where it would be, say, rate limited to 5 megabits so that those devices can't do denial of service attacks and also can't slow down his internet.
Yeah.
So he built a small x86 server with 4 gigs of RAM and a 32 gig SSD and 4 ports gigabit network. And he installed pfSense 3.2, or sorry, 2.3.
Mm-hmm. There are also some graphs there describing the differences and, over time how it got better and shaped up.
And it shows how he used the quality of service stuff, and it shows his configuration here. Basically, he measured and found that his upstream connection could do about 13 megabits. So he rate limited it to 12.5 megabits. And then he's got this really good latency graph down here. And basically he measured, so this graph shows speed tests done from his computer to the website over time. And you can see that he's getting about the speed he's supposed to the whole time. But this graph shows latency from his machine to the next hop at his ISP. And you can see when he had the quality of service and the rate limiting turned off, when he started uploading, suddenly his latency went from a couple of milliseconds to 250 milliseconds. But if he left the QoS on, then the latency didn't spike, even though he was uploading like 1% slower than the maximum of his connection. But if you add that extra 1%, then you start buffering, and all of a sudden these packets take longer to go through. So he ran a number of tests. He ran ping6 against speedtest.net to measure latency. He turned off QoS to simulate the normal mode, and he turned it back on to simulate the better mode. And he started multiple simultaneous outbound TCP and UDP streams to saturate his outbound link. And basically from that plot, you can see that without the shaping done by the pfSense, the latency would go up by 1,200%.
Wow.
Whereas with the shaping from the pfSense, he still gets all of the speed from his internet, but he doesn't get this latency spike, meaning that when his upload is busy, say when he's running Dropbox, it doesn't kill his download speeds. So this way he can still watch Netflix.
Yeah, this is desirable, and I guess many people have a similar setup who want to tune that a little bit towards that goal.
Yeah, and he talks a bit about his methodology for that. Instead of a flat rule like, do a speed test, figure out what your ISP is actually giving you, and then subtract 20%, that might be wasting quite a bit depending on what your upload is. So he has this method he uses where he's looking at the loss of ICMP and UDP and measuring latency, and then just reducing the maximum upload speed by 1% at a time until the loss gets to a low enough number and the latency isn't spiking, and then use that number.
Yeah, that's a good approach. And people
but
should
you
check
can
that
definitely
out.
see the impact of shaving that top 1% off your connection to avoid getting into buffering. And then, so all the details on how to do it with pfSense are in the article. And he asks, that's how he maximized the speed of his 9 gigabit internet connection. What have you done for your network?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask. Yeah. Okay. Our next story is FreeBSD on an 11-inch MacBook Air 5.1 from mid-2012 from Sevan. So he has a little blog post about his experiences here. He starts writing, this tiny machine has been with me for a few years now. It has mostly run OS X, though I have tried OpenBSD on it before. Besides the screen resolution, I'm still really happy with, hardware-wise. Software-wise, not so much. I use an external disk containing a Z-pool with my data on it. Among this data, there are several source trees. CVS on the ZFS file system on OS X is painfully slow. I dislike that builds running inside terminal.app are slow at the expense of a response UI. The system seems fragile. At the slightest push, the machine will either hang or become unresponsive. Buggy serial drivers which do not implement the break signal and cause instability are frustrating. And this pretty much motivated him on trying other operating systems on it. So last week, whilst working on rump kernel builds, he introduced some new build issues into the process of fixing others. He needed to pick up a new changes from the CFS, and by updating his copy of the source tree and run builds to test if issues were still present. He was let down on both counts. It took ages to update the source, and in the process of cross-compiling NetBSD EBB MIPS64, the system locked hard. That was it. Time to look at what was possible elsewhere. While I have been using OS X for many years, I've not tried to anything exclusive on it. Maybe Tweetbot, perhaps, but that's it. And he mentions the BSD Now podcast. I don't know. I don't listen to that one, but yeah. They've been covering changes coming into TrueOS, formerly PCBSD, and their experiments seemed interesting. The project now tracks FreeBSD current. They've replaced RCNG with OpenRC as the init system, and it comes with a pre-configured desktop environment using their own window manager, Lumina. Booting the USB flash image made it to an X11 without any issue. The dock has a widget which states the detected features, no Wi-Fi, Broadcom in this case. Sound card is detected and screen resolution set to 1366 by 768. And I plan to give it a try on the weekend. Friday, he made backups and wiped the system. Yes, you should always do that before wiping that system. TrueOS installed without any issue. After a short while, he had a working desktop, resuming from sleep, working out of the box. He didn't spend much time testing TrueOS, switching out NetBSD head, only to realize that he really needed ZFS. So while I was testing things out, might as well give stock FreeBSD 11 stable a try. And since TrueOS is based on current, it turns out sleep doesn't work yet, but sound does work out on the box. And if a few invocations of package, he had Xorg, DWN, Firefox, CVS, and VirtualBox OSE installed in a binary package. From VirtualBox, it seems to cause the system to panic. There's a bug report linked to that one. but I should have been able to survive without my virtual machines over the next few days as I settle in. He continues to write, I'm considering ditching VirtualBox and converting the VDI files to raw images so that they can be written to a new ZBall for use with Beehive. As my default keyboard layout is Dvorak, OS X set the EFI settings to this layout. The first time I installed FreeBSD 11 stable, I opted for full disk encryption, but ran into this odd issue where to boot the keyboard layout was Dvorak and password was accepted, the system would boot, and as it went to mount the various file systems, it would switch back to QWERTY. I tried entering password with both layouts, but wasn't able to progress any further. No bug report yet, but I haven't ruled out myself as the source of the problem. For the Thunderbolt Gigabit adapter, the BGE and DVI adapter both worked on FreeBSD, though the Gigabit adapter needs to be plugged in at boot to be detected. So you cannot plug that in during the system running already. The trackpad bind to WSP. Left, right, and middle clicks are available through single, double, and triple finger tap, so that works. And the sound card binds to SND_HDA and works out of the box. So for Wi-Fi, he's using the URTW alpha adapter, which is a bit on the large side, but works very reliably. A copy of the DMASC is also provided, and yeah, that's a nice write-up of his current experiences. For people who have all the hardware around and still want to use those and are not so happy with the latest the OS X changes, that's a good alternative, and many of the devices seem to work and are supported with drivers. I mean, this is from mid-2012. There's a lot of time happening, and people have developed drivers. So yeah,
but
check
it's
those
good to
out.
see Savan running FreeBSD, so...
Yeah, he's experimenting with a couple of systems, and he's
Yes.
also not shy of writing about what's not working and submitting bug reports, which is good.
Yep. And cut. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories, then Charsnap, and then the feedback.
Uh-huh.
And then we're done.
Okay. Starting to get sleepy, but yeah, I'll hold out. There we go. As a public holiday
the second
tomorrow.
monitor behaves, I'll be able to hit record. Come on.
Is it just a flaky cable, or?
I don't think it's the cable, but I'm going to disconnect the cable and reconnect it after the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It doesn't seem like it wants to come back, so I will... Of course, as soon as I threaten it, it starts working. Okay.
I will exchange you. Yeah.
And recording.
So it's time to get into our little Beastie Bits section here. The first one is about OpenSense call for testing for SafeStack.
Importance.
And importance, of
so
course.
this is an announcement on the OpenSense forums from Sean Webb, who's watching live, I think. And he says it's his pleasure to announce the call for testing for SafeStack in the OpenSense ports tree. While SafeStack is already deployed in the base operating system, it has not yet been applied to the ports tree, which contains all the third-party software. This call for testing applies SafeStack to the ports tree, and it provides instructions on how to try this out on your OpenSense router. So log into the GUI, go to the System tab, go to the Firmware section and the settings of that, change your firmware flavor to Other, and type in 11.1/SafeStack, and that'll change your package repo to be the one compiled with SafeStack.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nice.
then there's instructions on reporting problems and so on there, and if you have an OpenSense appliance, check that out.
Yeah, it's a nice addition to the whole system.
Mm-hmm. This next one is quite fun. So there's this podcast type thing called rewritinghistorycasts.com. So they do little videos about rewriting historic code. So in this example that they have up on their website for free is rewriting the 4.4 BSD CAT program. So
interesting.
CAT's a relatively simple C program, but there's a couple of bits to it, right? You have to take one or more files and then concatenate all that output to the standard output. And you have to deal with the fact that if one of the input file names is dash, or if there are no input file names, then the input will be standard in. And then you want to read from files in reasonably sized buffers instead of 1 byte at a time, and all this other stuff. But this short video, it basically walks through writing all that code. It's only about 5 3/4 minutes, and it's a great way to kind of get the basics of writing a simple C program from scratch.
Yeah, I remember that one.
As the program comes together.
Yeah, I remember the early programming, which we did on Unix. They also had a little explanation how cat is working in the source code itself, and we were tasked with extending it a little bit. Yeah, that was a nice experience. Knowing what the original program does and us trying to, emulate that behavior.
And yes,
check that out.
The chat room points out, wow, that's classic C style. Yes, the code they're comparing it to is the original 4.4 BSD code from the late 80s. So yeah,
it's been a while. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah, so the historians and the programming aficionados might want to check that out and see how it got started and what it looks like now.
So if you have 5 minutes to spare, watching that video is quite educational, even though it's very basic C, so you don't have to know C. If you know any other programming language, you can quickly understand what's happening, and it's a great way to be like, oh, turns out C is not actually that hard, but it's also just a nice little intro, soft landing. But if you are interested in the old code of various bits of BSD, then do check out the Unix history repo, which has many branches, starting back at, research PDP 7 versions of Unix up through the various, BSD 1, 2, etc., BSD 4.4, 4.4 Lite, etc. And you can actually see all the source code, and by following these commits, you can actually follow it all the way forward. So, you can start with, oops, GitHub is crashing. But you could follow the cat program all the way through from its origins out to the end. So the version of hat for the PDB, or version of cat for the PDB 7 is all written in some kind of assembly. But anyway, the Unix history repo is a great way to allow you to actually start with a modern set of code and step it backwards and see how it's changed over the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah, or if you found a bug, then you can see where this originally came from and what other projects might have, got that specific code path, and you might want to check out which other programs are affected or projects included that.
Yep.
It's a good thing.
And if you want just an overview version of that, we talked about it a little bit the other day, but they have a newer post about it. The Unix architecture diagrams, they now have color.
Oh, nice. So similar subsystems are having the same color? They've
completed the first edition versus FreeBSD sets now, and they all have color. So it's definitely worth checking out to see how the system has evolved between first edition Unix and FreeBSD as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely check those out if you like the original ones, and I guess there will be a little bit more polishing over the weeks and months, and we'll be happy to cover those again. And last but not least is our favorite author, Michael W. Lucas, with RelayD and HTTPD Mastery is out. So the book is finished apparently. He writes, I'm pleased to say that RelayD and HTTPD Mastery is now available in print and ebook. Congratulations. Sponsors should be able to log into their accounts and download the updated book. I don't have a print copy of the book in my hands yet, so he posted a couple of tweets about that one a couple of hours ago, I guess. But they're on the way. Unless something goes wrong, I'll A, have copies mailed to all the print sponsors before I leave for BSDCan, and B, have a few copies for BSDCan itself. Now to put in some quantity time for a third edition of Absolute FreeBSD before BSDCan. Okay, so yeah, people should check out that book if they're interested in
Yes.
what RelayD is
If
and
you
HTTPD.
get a copy, you should bring it with you to BSDCan or EuroBSDCon to get it autographed. If you don't have a copy, then you can get one, or you can try to get one of the few copies that'll be available at his booth at BSDCan itself.
Yeah, a good opportunity to get
And
your
then
own copy
there-
signed.
You might be able to get it signed by like Rake and other people as well.
While you're there, yeah.
People that actually
Good
worked on
opportunity.
RelayD.
Yeah,
This
check
week's
out that
episode
book.
is also brought to you by Tarsnap. Go to tarsnap.com/bsdnow and check it out. It's easy to get started. Just give them some money and they give you storage and you back up your stuff into it.
But you're the only person getting access to that because you're the person holding the only key, because Tarsnap is the online backup for the truly paranoid.
Yes, all the data is encrypted on your computer with your key that only you have. And only once it's encrypted is it sent out to the Amazon cloud where they store it for you. Because it gets deduplicated and compressed first, you don't pay for duplicate blocks and you don't pay for stuff that could be compressed, not being compressed or whatever. You know, the advantages from compression, the savings go to you, not to Colin, who runs Tarsnap.
Yeah, indeed. And you can have your storage solution and you still are the only person having that only key to it. No one else can access that, not even Colin.
Yep. This is the backups you need for your truly critical files, the files that you can't live without and the files that you can't live with anybody else has access to. This is for the real secrets.
Yeah, only you want to have access.
Mm-hmm. But head over there and check it out. If you need help with that, our friend Michael Lucas actually wrote a whole book about it. Tarsnap Mastery, online backups for the truly paranoid. And it walks through a bunch of the bits, like installing and setting up Tarsnap on Linux, Unix, Windows, and OS X. Fully exploiting the features like encryption and duplication that are in there, how to create and recover archives, how to customize the backups to be precisely the files you want and not the other ones, because why pay to store files you don't want to back up. How to passphrase protect your keys, how to create and manage special purpose keys for different things, how to automatically back up and rotate your archives, how to understand and resolve performance issues with your backups, and how to quickly restore complete systems from backups. Yeah.
Yep.
Ditch the tape room, put your backups online, but you have to know that they're safe.
Indeed, yeah. And you can get all the Tarsnap clients from tarsnap.conf for Linux, for BSDs, macOS, and even Windows.
Tarsnap Mastery, because life doesn't back itself up.
That pretty much says it all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, feedback time.
Feedback time is coming this week in interesting bits. So we have the first one is from Carlos about Asus, the Tinker board. He writes, is this the board being targeted by BSD? So he provides two links to newatlas.com and asus.com. And I could see it as a pfSense box, 1 gigabit in front of the modem on router and delivering pfSense-based Wi-Fi to all of your gizmos. Do you know if there's support for that one already?
The particular CPU on this is not one I've heard of. The RK38 or 3288. They don't actually mention what company makes the CPU, so it's hard to tell if that SoC is supported at all.
It's not an ARM processor.
I think it's definitely ARM or MIPS. I just don't know which, but I imagine ARM.
Mm-hmm. Good question. So if people have that running on BSD, they should probably send us
this
an
particular
email.
device definitely isn't aimed at something like pfSense because it has a Mali GPU and is designed for 4K video playback.
It's a different purpose.
Yeah, it's definitely not meant. It's not specialized towards being a router. For that, there are companies like Netgate actually sell devices specifically designed with 2 hardwired Ethernet ports on them. Before that device, pfSense didn't run on ARM, and so even then, with all the different SoCs, you're probably better off picking one that's specifically designed for pfSense because it'll have better support.
Mm-hmm. But in general, if people have that board and used it with BSDs a little bit, then we would be happy to have a little post about that, a little story. Would be nice to know.
Yep.
The next story is from James. It's a firewall question. And he starts writing here. I have to switch gears a little bit here. He writes, "Hi, I hope this finds you well. This is mostly in response to your call for feedback and it's fairly trivial, so I won't be offended if you don't use it. Well, that's fine. I've recently set up a web server on DigitalOcean running FreeBSD 11. I've installed SSH Guard and configured it to work with a simple IPFW rule set. I've disabled challenge response passwords, but I want to cut down on the length of the logs and another layer of protection." He provides a little bit of output from the IPFW-A list command, providing all the rule sets, I guess, that he has. And obviously, the leftmost column indicates the rule number, but I'm not sure on the other two. The FreeBSD handbooks only says accounting information and the packet count for matched rules. So it seems like the rightmost column is the packet count, but then what's the middle number?
It's actually the other way. So the first number, obviously, is the rule number. The second column is the number of packets. And the third column is the number of bytes.
Okay. So I guess the handbook's wrong on that account. Good to know.
I don't think the handbook's wrong. I think you just misunderstood it. But the handbook could state explicit what those two are, I suppose. But yeah, you can see that on your rule, you've blocked 2,817 packets, which is added up to 168,000 bytes of data.
Okay, that's something already. Second, are there any obvious mistakes in my firewall setup? This is just a test server, so I'd still like to avoid being too stupid. So far, so the rule set pretty much denies a couple of things. And
you probably don't want to turn ICMP off entirely.
For pings.
This will break path MTU discovery and a couple other things. But other than that, it looks kind of okay. It's like, your firewall's whatever you want it to be. As long as it's doing what you want it to do, it's fine.
Yeah. So there's no
you get to decide.
Gaping hole. Yeah.
But
much.
It looks fine.
Okay. And he closes with, "I love the show and have really been enjoying Benedict's contributions." Well, thanks, but it wouldn't have been all put together if Alan wasn't here. It's interesting that all the Linux show focus on corporate news and industry drama, and the BSD show focuses on the technical aspects of the operating system. Okay, thanks for your submission here.
So Adam writes in next about the ZFS books. He says he learned about the ZFS mastery books from the Level 1 Linux podcast, which I did I guess it was a month or two ago now. He says that he used to work with FreeBSD back in the early 2000s and now primarily work with Gentoo and Arch. He says, are the ZFS books generalized enough to pick up for Linux, or are they specific tailored to BSD? They're definitely usable for Linux. All the ZFS command line stuff is the same. The only bits that are a little different are, in the advanced book, we talk a little bit about how to do multipath and some labeling on the disks. That stuff won't apply directly, but anything that's ZFS specific is pretty much universal across all the implementations of ZFS, including Illumos and so on. The parts where the sysctls, the tunables have the same name on Linux, but they'll be under like /sys/modules ZFS or something like that, instead of where they are in FreeBSD. But all that will apply the same. And yeah, it's mostly just the partitioning and some of the very basics of how disks work on FreeBSD that'll be slightly different. But being that you're familiar with BSD from the early 2000s, you'll probably be able to understand what's happening and translate that to Linux easily. So yes, the ZFS books, especially the first one, are definitely universally applicable to Linux.
Yeah, and then you can basically, try it out. And
yeah.
If there's something
most of the advice in the advanced one will work fine on Linux as well. It's just there's a couple of specific bits, when we're telling you how to use iSCSI or whatever, obviously it's going to be slightly different on Linux, but all the concepts will be the same, so it'll map out nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a good overall introduction to ZFS, not just for the BSDs, but also the Linuxes or whatever systems are using that one as well. And the last question is from David about managing ZVols. He writes, thank you both for the interesting and informative show. I learn something new each week. You're not the only one. I have a question on managing snapshot size on ZVols. I'm using a 1.5 terabyte ZVol as the backing store for an iSCSI share from FreeNAS. This share is being used as a data disk on a Windows server, standard user files in home directories. I've scheduled snapshots every couple of hours, which are kept for 2 weeks. The challenge is that I find the total space used by this ZVol grows to over 4 times the original size. Is there a way I can figure what is causing such a huge size for those snapshots and perhaps manage them better? And he writes, I can understand snapshots comprising a fair amount of space, but this seems extreme.
It depends how much data is actually changing. In particular, in this case, probably because you have NTFS on top of it. Part of what's going to change every time you touch a file is the master file table, or MFT, on the NTFS.
Windows.
And so that's one's going to constantly change every time you touch a file. And so that'll lead to a certain level of churn. Other thing is look at your block size. If your block size is relatively large or whatever, then changing, if NTFS is writing in 4K blocks, but you're using 16K blocks on your ZVol, every one of those changes is going to change a whole block and amplify the amount of data that's changing. Although for a lot of it, I would expect compression to save you from a lot of this headache. The other thing is watch with the ZVol of using too small of a block size. You can end up, because of padding on, if you're backing this with like a RAID Z2, then a small block size can actually just lead to a lot of wasted space because of the padding that RAID Z has to use. So with that, you can end up where a lot of that space is actually being eaten up by the padding, not necessarily the new data you're writing. And that applies to the main data on the ZVol and the snapshots. Outside of that, doing ZFS get all on that ZVol and ZFS list -t all on that data set and sending those in might make it a little easier for me to tell what's going on.
Yeah, otherwise there's not much to gain from the ZVols directly on the ZPool.
Well, yes,
There's no
case, for your Windows server, if it's just user files and home directories, you might be better off putting out a native ZFS data set and exposing it via Samba. But iSCSI definitely works, and maybe we can look into it and see what is it that's causing to take up extra space there.
Because otherwise you might run out of disk space really soon.
Yeah, you can always add more disks to your ZFS, though.
Yeah, or educate your users a little bit more about not storing so many big files. But yeah, sometimes it's unavoidable.
We got a last-minute request that I'll have to try to sneak in here.
Okay.
We'll have it next week too. But the Triangle BSD users group is having a meeting Tuesday, June 27th at Root BSD in Cary, North Carolina. They'll have Phil Schaefer from Juniper talking about libxo, which is a library that allows command line tools in FreeBSD to output XML, JSON, and
XML, JSON, HTML, and
HTML.
What else?
I think that's it. Those three. But yes, and that'll be hosted by Root BSD, which is a hosting company that uses BSD. So that's Tuesday, June 27th at 7 p.m. And we'll have links and more stuff about that next week.
Will there be recordings maybe of the talk?
I don't know. I hope so.
Okay.
All right. That's it for this week.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
And done. All right, ready for your last bit?
Yeah, scrolling up. Yeah, that pretty much is straightforward. All right.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Full screen.
This week on the show, we're going to give you a pledge of love to OpenBSD, combating ransomware like WannaCry with OpenZFS, and show you how to use pfSense to maximize your non-gigabit internet connection. So it's a good mixture of the BSDs in this episode of BSD. Now. It's 2 times, yeah, in one sentence. Yeah. Oh, right. This one or
Alrighty then.
these two.
And that go in the junk folder. This is the interview with MW Lucas. This is the news.
So is it the OpenBSD love affair or for the love of Puffy?
I don't know.
Puffy love? Other topics? I don't want to cry.
Yes, do that.
I don't want to cry? Okay.
Yeah.
With the same writing. Yeah. Okay, I keep the old title for next week around, so in case we want to do that.
Yep.
Next week's title. Luckily, I don't have to work tomorrow.
Oh, lucky you.
There's a holiday.
Ours was
And-
Monday, so.
Ah.
Victoria Day.
Mm. And then on Friday I'll head over to Karlsruhe to the Goulash Programmer Night. I guess
Mhm.
that's what they call it. And give my little talk about what FreeBSD is and its community, and meet some people there, hopefully, and have a good time with the hackers and the CCC folks.
Cool. Did you get my email?
Yeah, I will book the other travel, or you can still take the car with me.
Whatever way you prefer. I'm not fussy.
Yeah, I'll think about a little bit. Otherwise, we'll just take the train and we'll be on our
Yep.
way.
Either way is fine. I don't care.
Okay. But now I have the times and I can plan better with that.
Yep.
All right. And I need to book my BSD camp travel and the accommodation.
Yes.
I was thinking about Churchill College again, but I compared prices a little bit, and the St. Catherine's option seems to be a little bit cheaper.
It's where most of the other people are going to stay, as far as I know.
Mm.
So that has advantages. And it's closer to town. So for going out at night, it has advantages.
Mm.
But Churchill is closer to the college or to the computer lab for the actual talks days. But if you check Dev Summit, Andrew Turner said make sure you don't leave until Sunday. Because if you have an option, because Saturday there's going to be some touristy stuff that we're going to do.
Yeah, I plan to be there from Tuesday till Saturday. Let's go to August. Yeah. because then I can take the flight on Sunday back because there are some better options there for me to get back, and then I'll be in the office on Monday again.
Right. I think I'll do something similar. I know Brad, I think, gets there the Friday before.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
there might be some pre-conference activities.
Yeah, so I'm thinking going home Sunday. I'm not sure what day I'm going to go back. Although Colin said he's definitely staying for a few days afterwards. So, I don't know. Some balance of that.
There will be, options to keep people entertained.
Try to figure out what a couple more people are doing and make sure. I don't want to miss out on everything, but I don't want to sit around Cambridge by myself for 2 days either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that however early I decide to get there, that Brad at least will be around, so there's that.
Yeah, and I need to talk to my professor whether he comes along with me or separate or different accommodation.
Oh, you're bringing a guest?
Yeah, so he's one of our operating system professors who talked to George a couple of times when he was here. So there might be something we could do in the teaching area. And if not, then I'll just go alone. That also works. I figured out that there are now flights from Frankfurt to Heathrow directly with Lufthansa on some crazy routing with Ryanair. Either I didn't find them last year or they just opened those, but I'm happy to fly with Lufthansa.
Heathrow's where I'm going, but apparently some of the other airports around are easier to get to Cambridge from.
Yeah, I checked out the London City Airport that George recommended and just then take the train via the King's Cross station. I've never been to that one, so there's something new every week.
It's basically saying if you go to Heathrow, you're going to take the subway to somewhere and then take that. Or sorry, I took the Heathrow Express to a subway station, then the subway to King's Cross, and then King's Cross to Cambridge. So the other airport would in fact be easier, but it's not fly there from Canada airport.
Yeah. Yeah, for you it's a little bit more focused on that.
There's one flight that can go to one of the other airports, but it's kind of a small plane on a discount airline. And
oh yeah, not nice over the Atlantic for a couple of hours.
Exactly. It's like a 6+ hour flight as it is.
So other crazy ideas I had. I was thinking about spending the week between Christmas and New Year's in Tokyo because flights are currently very cheap. It's like 250 euros one way from Frankfurt. And I'm like, well, this could be nice, but yeah, I'm not sure. And it's like Christmas planning from in the middle of summer. It's
right. Well, also it's I guess those are not vacation days. Those are already holidays. But
yeah, these are regular holidays. Where
so much.
It's just a wild idea. Maybe I'll flesh it out a little bit in the coming days and weeks. Need to get a little bit more info on the November conference that they planned there in the Asian region. Maybe something at BSDCan. Oh yeah, Li Wen will be there. I can ask him what's the plan.
Anyway, my dinner's ready, and we're done.
Yeah. All right, time to sleep. Okay, so we're pretty much everything, or most of the parts for next week already, and just need to find the bits around it and record those.
Reminds me, actually, shoot, I need to move the interview recording out of episode 195.
Yeah, otherwise it will be...
Otherwise, it'll ship, and then...
Oops.
Yeah. So that makes this week's episode only 1 hour and 15 minutes.
Woo! Great. And then people have something to watch while we're at Canada and BSDCan, and those people who can't make it still have a bunch of cool stuff from Michael Lucas.
Yep. I guess that'll give us enough time there.
Then we'll hunt people down right at BSDCan and interview them there.
Yep.
Because we also we're 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, even 4 episodes until our 200th episode. Hashtag BSD Now 200. It's a thing.
Yep. All right. I gotta go. I will talk to you later.
Yep. Thanks, Alan.
Yep. Bye.
Bye, everyone.